A pack of German shepherds surrounds a crying child on the road. What happens next is shocking. Part 1. The Lonely Road. The morning fog hung heavy over the quiet countryside road, blurring the edges of trees and stretching the world into a hazy dream. Birds chirped distantly, but otherwise, all was still until a faint, irregular sound broke the silence. It was the sound of soft whimpers and quick, shallow breaths. A young boy, no older than 7, stood at the edge of the cracked asphalt, trembling. He wore a tattered red hoodie and mismatched shoes caked with dirt. His face was streaked with dried tears, and his eyes, wide and glassy, flicked from the surrounding woods to the empty road ahead. He held his tiny arms close to his chest as if shielding himself from more than just the morning chill. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. His name was Daniel, but he couldn't remember if anyone had called him that in days. How long had it been since he'd eaten, or since he'd heard a kind voice? All he could remember was running through the woods, away from the shouting, the smashing bottles, the slamming doors. He didn't know where he was now, only that he wasn't home. But then again, home never really felt safe to begin with. Daniel took a slow step forward, hoping anyone would drive by, but no cars came. Just fog, wind, and silence. Until he heard them. It started as a rustle in the trees. Then the sound of padding feet, quiet, quick, deliberate. He turned sharply, panic in his eyes. His mind jumped to wolves, monsters, or maybe the people he'd run from finally catching up. From the brush, 6 figures emerged. At first, he thought he was dreaming. 6 large dogs, German shepherds, strong and alert, stepped into view. They didn't bark, they didn't growl. They surrounded Daniel in a gentle circle, their heads low, ears perked, eyes cautious but calm. Daniel froze. One of the dogs, larger than the rest with a streak of white across his muzzle, stepped forward. His golden eyes met Daniel's as if trying to read the boy's soul. The dog's tail gave a slow wag, not too fast, not too threatening, just enough to say, "You're safe now." The boy's breath hitched. He dropped to his knees, his legs finally giving in under the weight of exhaustion and fear. Tears welled up and spilled freely as he hugged himself tighter, unsure if this was rescue or some strange dream before the end. The large shepherd came closer and pressed his warm nose into Daniel's cheek. That gentle touch cracked something inside him. The dam broke. He sobbed, great, racking sobs that echoed down the road like a storm. Not just because he was scared or hungry or cold, but because for the first time in as long as he could remember, something had come to him without hurting him. The other dogs moved in, careful and quiet. One sat beside him, her soft fur brushing his leg. Another lay in front, placing his head on Daniel's knee. 2 positioned themselves behind him, as if standing guard. A smaller one gently licked his hand. They didn't ask questions. They didn't demand anything. They just stayed. Daniel cried until he couldn't anymore. And then he sat, surrounded by this silent, loyal pack, staring at the fog with red-rimmed eyes. The dogs seemed to understand. They didn't move, except to shift closer, warm bodies pressing against his sides to shield him from the cold. And then, as if some unseen decision had been made, the lead dog, the one with the golden eyes, stood up and looked down the road. He barked once, short and low. The others responded by rising one by one. They turned toward the road, then looked back at Daniel. The message was clear. "Come with us." Daniel hesitated, but his legs moved before his mind caught up. He stood slowly, wiping his nose on his sleeve, and followed them. The dogs walked at his pace, never rushing, never straying far. One trotted ahead. Another stayed beside him, brushing his leg with every step. The pack moved as one, guiding him forward, down a road he didn't recognize. towards something he couldn't yet understand. In the distance, through the fog, came the faint hum of an engine. A car. Daniel's heart jumped. He didn't know if it would stop. He didn't know if it would bring him safety or send him back to the world he'd tried to escape. But with these dogs, these angels on 4 legs, he didn't feel so small anymore. He didn't feel alone. As the car approached, slowing as the driver spotted the strange sight ahead, the dogs formed a protective semicircle in front of Daniel. Their posture was calm but commanding. "This boy is under our watch." The vehicle stopped. A woman stepped out, eyes wide with shock at the sight of a filthy, trembling child guarded by a pack of shepherds. Daniel looked up at her, uncertain, exhausted, but no longer afraid. The lead dog barked once more, and that's how it all began. Part 2. The Soldier and the Stray. The woman who stepped out of the stopped vehicle wasn't an ordinary passerby. Captain Elena Reyes, retired military, K9 handler and local rescue coordinator, had spent most of her adult life training service dogs for combat zones. A grizzled yet graceful figure in her late 40s, Reyes had the presence of someone who had seen fire and walked through it, without flinching. But nothing in her years of combat or canine rescue could have prepared her for the sight in front of her. A frightened boy standing in the middle of the road, surrounded by 6 calm, disciplined German shepherds. Their formation wasn't chaotic. It was deliberate, protective. It reminded her of military flank patterns, 1 shepherd tall, broad-shouldered, and marked with a jagged white blaze across his snout, stood slightly ahead of the others. His stance was not aggressive but assertive. His eyes locked onto Reyes, measuring her, as if he were deciding whether she posed a threat to the boy. Reyes slowly raised both hands, palms open. "Easy, soldier," she whispered, directing the words not to Daniel, but to the dog. Maximus didn't flinch. Daniel, dirt-covered and dazed, gripped the lead dog's fur with one hand as if it were a lifeline. "He won't let anyone hurt." "Me," the boy said, his voice hoarse. "They all came." When I cried, Reyes felt something twist in her chest. "You're safe now, okay?" "What's your name?" The boy hesitated. Daniel. "I'm Captain Reyes. I used to train dogs like these. They came for you because they know a good soul when they see one." One of the smaller shepherds, a female with large ears and a gray muzzle, let out a quiet whine and stepped forward to sniff Reyes' boot. Reyes smiled and slowly extended a hand. "You smell old friends on me, don't you?" Behind her, the rescue truck idled. Inside was a crate of food, blankets, and emergency supplies. Reyes had been out scouting rural roads for signs of dumped animals, a sad job that had become too routine in recent years. She never expected to find a coordinated canine rescue. "Daniel, where's your family?" she asked gently. His eyes darted to the trees. "Gone." Gone could mean many things. Dead, drunk, abusive, lost. Reyes didn't press. Instead, she looked again at the dogs. All 6 were clean, but underfed. Their eyes were bright, but their bodies bore signs of wear, scars, ticks, cracked paws. But their loyalty? Intact, unbreakable. Especially in the leader, the one Daniel clung to. "Do you know his name?" she asked, nodding to the alpha dog. Daniel glanced up at him, then whispered, "I call him Maximus." A fitting name, Reyes thought. She studied the dog again and noticed something peculiar, an old tattoo under the fur of his inner ear. Her eyes widened. "Wait a second." She stepped slowly toward Maximus. He didn't growl, but his body stiffened until she crouched low and spoke in a command tone. "Stand down, Kilo 94. Handler ID, Reyes, authenticate." Maximus blinked. His ears twitched. And then, in a move so precise it stunned Daniel, the dog sat, lifted his paw, and tapped it twice on the ground. He was responding to a military command. Reyes looked up at Daniel. "This dog, he's not just smart, he's trained." Special Forces K9 unit, by the look of it. But that tattoo. That unit was disbanded years ago. He shouldn't even be alive. Daniel gripped Maximus tighter. He found me. He didn't. Leave me. None of them did. Reyes's instincts went into overdrive. A boy alone in the woods. A disbanded military dog alive and well. And 5 other shepherds moving in sync with him. This wasn't coincidence. It was a story someone had. Buried, and now it was clawing its way back to the surface. "Daniel," she said gently, "would you and your pack like to come with me?" He nodded. She opened the truck's rear doors. Maximus jumped in first, turning to look back and ensure Daniel followed. The rest of the pack climbed in with surprising order, forming a protective half-circle around the boy as he sat in the back seat, wrapped in a blanket. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As Reyes drove toward the nearest rescue shelter, her thoughts spiraled. What happened to the rest of Maximus's unit? Why was he here, not in government care, not with a handler, but leading a pack of discarded dogs? And what were they running from? One thing was clear. These dogs weren't ordinary strays. Someone had trained them. Someone had abandoned them. And someone was going to want them back, for reasons not entirely noble. Reyes glanced in the rear view mirror. Daniel had fallen asleep, head nestled against Maximus's side. One of the other dogs gently licked the boy's temple. A family, forged in trauma. "Whoever left you," she muttered under her breath, "is going to regret it." She didn't know it yet, but she'd just become part of something far bigger than a rescue. She joined a pack, and this was only the beginning. Part 3. The Shelter and the Secrets. Animal shelter on the edge of the county wasn't anything fancy. Peeling paint on the sign, chain-link fences humming under the wind, and a cramped office that smelled of hand sanitizer and wet fur. But to Captain Elena Reyes, it was a second home. As her truck pulled into the gravel lot, the 6 German shepherds perked up. Some stood alert. Maximus didn't move, still curled protectively around the sleeping child in the back seat. His golden eyes remained focused on the approaching building. Inside, 2 volunteers looked up in surprise as Reyes entered, holding a bundled Daniel against her shoulder. The boy's face was sunken, eyes hollow, body light from too many missed meals. "Jesus," murmured Marta, a sharp-tongued woman in her 50s with a heart of gold. "Where'd you find him?" "Alone, out near Ridge Road," Reyes said, lowering the boy gently onto a soft padded cot. "With 6 German shepherds," Marta blinked. 6? They weren't chasing him. They were guarding him, coordinated. Disciplined, especially the big one. I'd swear on my old deployment pin that he's ex-military. From outside came the sound of soft barking, then silence. Then a single bark. One of them just signaled, Reyes muttered. She stepped back. Outside, where the pack had fanned out into a protective ring around the truck, sniffing the air and watching the woods. Even in a safe place, they didn't let their guard down. That told her everything she needed to know. These dogs had seen things. She opened the side gate and let them in, guiding them to the shelter's back kennel yard. Maximus walked in last, pausing only to nudge the boy's foot gently before taking his place near the fencing. He didn't lie down. He stood like a sentinel. Reyes stepped into the office and booted up the dusty old PC. She typed into the military archive portal she still had access to through her retirement credentials. K9 Military Unit 9-4, Handler. Detachment Echo, she murmured, fingers flying across the keyboard. The file that popped up was sparse, most of it redacted. But enough was there. Unit disbanded, 5 years ago, final. Operation, redacted surviving assets. Transferred or euthanized. Her eyes narrowed. Euthanized? She cross-referenced the dog's tattoo, the one inside Maximus's ear. K94 EC Echomum. Alive and clearly operational, she whispered. So either someone faked records, or someone wanted this dog, this whole unit, gone. She printed what she could and tucked it into a folder, her military instinct screaming. There was more to this story, and it stank of buried orders and abandoned loyalty. Back in the resting area, Daniel had woken up. Marta was spooning warm broth into his hands. He looked hesitant at first, but the moment he tasted it, the boy's hunger betrayed him. He devoured the rest in silence. Reyes knelt beside him. "Daniel," she said gently, "do you remember how you got out there?" He didn't speak. She reached into her pocket and offered him a small card, an old military challenge coin from her canine unit. "My partner was like Maximus," she said. "His name was Bruno. He pulled me out of a collapsed compound once. Lost part of his hearing, but he never left me. Dogs like this don't just happen. They're trained, they're loyal, they're warriors." Daniel studied the coin, running his finger over the carved paw print. "Maximus is like that," he said finally. "He came when I was cold. He laid on me so I wouldn't freeze. And the others? They followed him. Like a team." Reyes nodded. "That's because they are. Or were." He looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means somebody trained them. But also somebody left them. Someone who didn't want them to be found." Daniel's eyes darkened. "He didn't want me to be found either." There it was. The truth, finally breaking through. Reyes reached out and gently touched his shoulder. "I don't know what happened to you, Daniel. But I know this much. Those dogs didn't stumble onto you. Maximus led them. He chose you. That means something." A beat passed. Then Daniel whispered, "I think he used to be a soldier." Reyes smiled. "I think he still is." As the sun dipped lower, casting amber light through the shelter windows, Reyes moved to a side office. She dialed a secure line to an old friend at the State Police K-9 Task Force. "Hey," she said when the line clicked. "I need a trace on a military working dog. Tattoo, K94ECHOM. The file's redacted and flagged. That usually means someone doesn't want it reopened." Her friend sighed. "Careful, Reyes, if it's one of the dogs from that program. Well, you're poking at ghosts." "I've been haunted before," she said flatly. "This time, I'm bringing a flashlight." She hung up. Outside, Maximus was staring at the forest. And somewhere far beyond the trees, someone who thought they'd gotten rid of the problem was about to learn. The pack had returned. Part 4, Claws in the Dark. The shelter was quiet that night, save for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the steady breathing of 6 German shepherds sprawled across the kennel floor like furry guardians. But Captain Reyes wasn't sleeping. She was watching. From her office window, she kept her eyes on the yard. Maximus remained on his feet, scanning the perimeter like a soldier on post. Even when the others rested, heads on paws, tails twitching. In sleep, Maximus stood motionless, golden eyes locked on the shadows beyond the fence. It wasn't just instinct. It was memory. Something was coming. Inside, Daniel stirred in his cot. Marta had given him fresh pajamas, a warm shower, and a thick blanket. But his dreams were restless, flashes of yelling, the slap of boots, the sound of a gunshot muffled by silence. He didn't fully understand what he had escaped from. He only knew he was still running. The creak of a gate outside snapped Reyes out of her thoughts. Her hand slid beneath her desk and gripped the cold steel of her service pistol. She stood, ears sharpened to every sound. There were only 2 people with keys to the shelter, and Marta was asleep in the break room. Someone else was here. She moved silently through the hallway, her boots barely making a sound on the linoleum floor. As she reached the rear exit, she paused, listening. A faint click. Then the rustling of metal. She cracked the door open an inch and peered through. A man in dark clothing was kneeling near the side gate, flashlight clenched between his teeth, bolt cutters in hand. Next to him was a van, windows blacked out, engine idling. Reyes cursed under her breath. Dog snatchers. In recent years, Shelters across the state had reported missing dogs, mostly larger breeds. Some were later found in underground fighting rings. Others vanished completely. The authorities never caught anyone red-handed. Until now, Reyes stepped into the cold night and leveled her weapon. Step away from the fence. She barked. The man froze. The flashlight fell from his mouth and rolled across the dirt. His eyes widened behind a black ski mask. "You've got no idea what you're interrupting, lady," he said, standing slowly. "These dogs aren't yours. They belong to no one but themselves," Reyes replied coldly. Another figure emerged from the passenger side of the van. Bigger, with tattoos running up his neck and a crowbar in his hand. "She armed?" Reyes took a step forward. "Yeah, want to test it?" The man lunged. Reyes didn't flinch. Her training kicked in like muscle memory. She sidestepped the first swing and slammed her elbow into the attacker's throat. He dropped the crowbar, coughing violently. The second man raised his hand and then stopped. A low growl echoed through the yard. Maximus was there. And he wasn't alone. The entire pack had formed a line behind the fence. Teeth bared, hackles raised, eyes glowing in the dark like wolves, ready to tear through the gate. Maximus barked, once. The sound cracked like thunder. Both intruders turned to run, but too late. Reyes tackled the one with the crowbar and pinned him, knee on his chest, gun pressed to his temple. The other tried to leap into the van, but Maximus had already cleared the gate. With terrifying speed, the shepherd clamped his jaws around the man's arm and yanked him to the ground. Holding, not mauling, but restraining, with the precision of a trained soldier, sirens wailed in the distance. Reyes had pressed the silent alarm as soon as she saw the bolt cutters. Now the local sheriff's team was arriving, late, but just in time to see two grown men pinned by one woman and a dog. "Get these bastards cuffed and inside," Reyes ordered. "And bring bolt cutters. They've got lockboxes in the van." Daniel had woken during the commotion. He stood barefoot in the hallway, hugging a pillow, eyes wide. Reyes approached him gently, kneeling so her face met his. "You okay, kid?" He nodded, though his lip trembled. "They came for the dogs." "Yeah," she said softly, "but we stopped them." Maximus trotted up and rested his head against Daniel's hip. The boy dropped to his knees and buried his face in the thick fur. Why would anyone take dogs like him? He asked. Reyes stood slowly, scanning the night. Because dogs like him are worth a lot in the wrong hands. Trained, obedient, strong. They wanted them for something ugly. Daniel's voice was small. "Fighting? Maybe, or maybe worse." The sheriff approached her, holding up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a tablet found in the van. "You'll want to see this," he said grimly. "Encrypted, but we'll crack it." These guys weren't working alone. She took the tablet and stared down at it, heart sinking, whatever this was. It was bigger than she thought. And now the pack was in the crosshairs. Part 5. A silent howl the next morning brought an eerie stillness over the shelter. The air was crisp, the wind gentle, but it carried the uneasy weight of what had happened the night before. Captain Reyes stood by the kennel yard with a mug of bitter, coffee in hand, her eyes locked on Maximus. The big shepherd paced along the fence, nose twitching, eyes sweeping the perimeter. The others were quiet but alert, no longer relaxed, no longer trusting. Daniel sat nearby on a small bench wrapped in a blanket too big for his frame, one hand resting on Maximus's back. Though the boy still said little, something about the dog's presence seemed to center him, ground him. Reyes turned her attention to the sheriff's deputy, who just arrived with the latest update. The two men arrested in the night had clammed up, offering only one line before requesting a lawyer. "We were just hired to grab the animals. That's it. We don't ask questions." The encrypted tablet was worse. No identifying information. Just a looping piece of video, grainy footage of dogs in cages, underground arenas, and a voice distorted by digital masking. Project Echo was never decommissioned. The assets were sold, some escaped. Some didn't, What's yours is ours, and we want them back. Reyes stared at the screen until her coffee went cold. Project Echo, that name again. She'd heard whispers about it during her military days. A classified K-9 unit, beyond even her clearance. Dogs trained for silent operations, night raids, extreme conditions. More than animals, tools, weapons, legends. But they were never meant to survive. The pack in her shelter? They weren't just strays. They were ghosts of a program that was supposed to be erased. She walked back toward Daniel. You holding up? He nodded. Did you sleep at all? A little, he mumbled. Maximus stayed awake the whole time. Reyes gave the dog a look. He doesn't sleep when he's on duty. Daniel looked up at her. Are they coming back? Reyes knelt so they were eye level. Yes, and next time they'll come harder, faster, quiet. The boy's eyes widened, fear dancing in their depths. But, she added, they won't catch us off guard again. We've got something they don't. He tilted his head. We've got a pack. Inside the shelter's small war room, a glorified break room filled with maps, radios, and old filing cabinets, Reyes began preparing. She contacted every dog handler, vet, and rescue ally she knew. She put out quiet feelers to her old military contacts, asking about Project Echo. Most gave the same answer. It doesn't exist. Never did. But two people said nothing, and that silence was louder than any denial. One sent a single line through an encrypted channel. If they survived, they were never meant to. Meanwhile, Marta busied herself packing crates of food and supplies. The shelter wasn't secure anymore. They needed to move, and fast. Reyes had access to a backup location. A decommissioned ranger station nestled deep in the woods, far off grid. That night, they loaded the dogs into the truck again. Daniel rode in front beside Reyes, clutching Maximus's old ID tag, the one Reyes had found tucked in a box from her military days. As they drove, Daniel finally spoke without being prompted. I don't think I'm supposed to be here, he said softly. Like them. I think. I wasn't meant to be found. Reyes gripped the wheel tighter. Who told you that? No one. It's just a feeling, like they were going to leave me. Like I saw something I wasn't supposed. Toho. That caught her attention. Saw what? He shook his head. I can't remember. Try. I remember a warehouse, a lot of barking. A man yelling, a door slamming shut behind me. Then ... Maximus. Reyes exhaled slowly. This boy hadn't just stumbled into the woods. He had escaped, or worse, had been released as bait. A test. A cleanup job gone wrong. She didn't tell him any of that. Not yet. The ranger station came into view, half covered in vines, roof partially collapsed on one side. But the basement was intact, and the surrounding woods would shield them. As they unloaded the dogs, Daniel followed Maximus to a clearing nearby. The moon shone down through the branches. The other dogs fanned out, sniffing the perimeter. Maximus sat at the edge of the trees and lifted his head. He didn't howl. He just stared. Why doesn't he make noise? Daniel asked, sitting beside him. Reyes had walked up behind them. She answered quietly, in his last deployment. Maximus was caught in a blast. Shrapnel. He survived, but it damaged part of his larynx. He barks when he has to, but he never howls. Does it hurt him? No, she said, but I think it reminds him of what he lost. Daniel leaned against the dog's side. He saved me anyway. He saved a lot of people, but they didn't save him. He and his unit were marked as lost assets. Disposed of, but Maximus, he broke protocol, he got out. And he found the rest. Daniel looked up, so they're not just a pack. They're a team. Reyes smiled faintly. They're soldiers. Above them, the trees whispered with the wind. Maximus's ears flicked toward the sound, his nose testing the air. And though he didn't howl. In his silence, there was a warning. They were being hunted. And this time, the pack would be ready. Part 6. The Echo Protocol. The ranger station was cold, even under heavy blankets. Wind howled through cracks in the boarded-up windows, and the floor creaked with every step. But to Daniel, it felt safer than anywhere he'd been in months. Maximus slept beside him, one eye always slightly open. The rest of the pack took shifts too outside, one by the stairwell, another at the far window. Only Reyes seemed to sleep soundly, her service weapon on the nightstand, her boots never far from reach. It had been 2 days since the attack at the shelter. Since then, they hadn't heard from law enforcement, media, or even Marta. The silence wasn't comforting, it was strategic. Someone was cleaning up loose ends. Reyes knew it. Daniel felt it in his bones. They were being hunted. But why? That morning, Reyes brewed coffee using a solar kettle she kept from her deployment days. Daniel sat on the porch of the station, watching the forest while Maximus rested at his feet. His hair was cleaner, his face fuller, but his eyes remained older than they should have been. "I think I remember something," he said softly. Reyes looked up from her notebook. "Go on." "There was a room, big, cold, with cages. Dogs?" He nodded. "But they weren't barking. Just waiting, like they knew someone was watching." "What else?" "A man, I don't know his name, but he wore black gloves. He always carried a phone. Sometimes he'd take one dog away. Then we'd never see it again." Reyes's jaw tightened. "Did he hurt you?" Daniel hesitated. "Not at first. But I saw what he did to the dogs who didn't listen." She knelt beside him, setting the coffee aside. "Daniel, that wasn't just a shelter. That was a facility." His eyes searched hers. "Like a prison?" "No, like a lab." The words sank into him like ice. She stood up, walking to her gear case. From a pouch inside, she pulled out a laminated folder and a small tablet. The screen flickered to life, showing grainy documents, military memos, redacted reports, encrypted logs. Daniel recognized some of the phrases: Echo Unit, Asset Realignment, Behavior Suppression Testing, Civilian Loss Protocol. "What is this?" "Everything I could dig up in the last 2 days," Reyes said. "Most of it was deleted years ago, but there were leaks. Bits and pieces left behind in secure backups. What I found points to something called the Echo Protocol." Daniel frowned. "Like Project Echo?" "No, protocol means it's still active." She tapped one document. "This one mentions Echo assets. That's what they called the dogs, not soldiers. Not companions, assets. It's all about testing loyalty, obedience, reprogramming. They were trying to create the perfect field unit. No hesitation, no fear, no independence." Daniel looked down at Maximus. "But he's not like that," Reyes nodded. "Exactly. That's why they want him back, or dead." She slid a photo across the table. It was old, faded, but Daniel could make out the figure. A younger Maximus, outfitted with a tactical vest, muzzle retracted, standing beside another figure, a tall man in uniform, clean-cut, face sharp with authority. "My old CO," Reyes said. "Colonel Breyer. He was the architect of Echo. Disappeared right after the program was buried. Nobody heard from him since, until..." She opened the next file. A blurry security cam still taken just 2 months ago, dated and time-stamped. It showed Breyer entering a private airstrip in Nevada. And behind him Daniel leaned closer. "That's the man with the gloves." Reyes exhaled. "So he didn't disappear. He went underground." "And if that's true..." She didn't finish the sentence, because they both knew what came next. Later that afternoon, Reyes took Daniel out into the clearing. The dogs followed like shadows. "I want to show you something," she said. She placed a small device on a stump and activated it. A mechanical whir, then a soft chirp. It was a training beacon used to issue commands to K9 units at long distances. Military-grade. Maximus stiffened. Reyes pressed a button. "Echo 1, form up." To Daniel's shock, The entire pack responded instantly. They lined up in a perfect formation, 2 rows of 3, with Maximus at the front. "Now," she said, looking at the boy, "you try." Daniel took the beacon, hand trembling slightly. "I don't know the codes. You don't need them. Just speak. They trust you." Daniel looked at Maximus. "Can you sit?" The dog obeyed. Daniel blinked. "Stand?" Maximus stood. The others followed. Reyes smiled faintly. "You're not just some lost kid anymore, Daniel. You're their handler now. You're part of the pack." He didn't say anything for a moment, but in his chest, something shifted. A spark of confidence, of belonging. That night, as the wind howled through the trees again, Reyes sat by the window, reading the same decrypted document over and over. Echo Protocol. Primary directive in event of asset compromise. Terminate host vessel. No retrieval. No press. Below it, a name stood out in bold. De Valente, civilian exposure risk. Reyes' heart sank. She turned slowly to the boy sleeping on the couch beside Maximus. They hadn't just stumbled onto him. He was on the list. Part 7. Names on a list. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of Reyes's old desk lamp. She stared at the printed document spread across the table, faded, redacted, but damning in its implications. The name De Valente stood out like a target painted in blood. Daniel wasn't a random survivor. He was a civilian liability. A loose end. Reyes's mind raced. If the Echo Protocol was still active, and Daniel's name appeared on its kill list, then someone in a very high place had already authorized his death. Not a retrieval. Not an erasure. Termination. She looked across the room at the couch. Daniel slept with one arm across Maximus's flank. The big dog breathed steadily, a protective wall between the boy and the world. The others were sprawled nearby in silent guard, their ears twitching at even the smallest sound. And now she knew why. Maximus wasn't just protecting Daniel out of instinct or kindness. He had been assigned. Morning came with a hard frost coating the trees. Daniel helped Reyes carry in firewood from the old ranger's storage shed. He didn't ask questions, and she didn't bring up the list. Not yet, but the air between them had changed. Tighter, heavier. Reyes watched him feed the dogs, noting how each one obeyed his gestures. They no longer saw him as a child. They followed his lead like soldiers. "Do you remember anything else?" she asked, breaking the silence. He shrugged. "Sometimes I dream about lights, loud ones, like in a hospital. Could've been the facility. I don't think I was sick, I think. They were watching me, testing me." Reyes's brow furrowed. Why would they be testing a civilian? Daniel didn't answer, but his expression darkened. Somewhere inside him, the memories were there, walled off, locked behind trauma and time. But they were cracking. Reyes knew what that meant. The sooner those walls came down, the more danger he'd be in. Later that afternoon, Reyes returned to the signal terminal she had hidden in the basement. It was an encrypted satellite uplink, a remnant from her time running. Back channel comes overseas. She activated the terminal and entered a sequence. The line buzzed. "Verification code, Tango Foxtrot 7, she said. A pause. Then a voice responded. "This is Operator Delta. Who's calling?" Elena Reyes, former K9 handler, Alpha Division. Authorization code Lima 49er Charlie. "Captain Reyes? That's a ghost call." "Yeah, well, guess I'm not as dead as they hoped. State purpose. I need intel on Project Echo. Civilian named Daniel Valente is listed as a primary directive target under Protocol Termination Clause. I want to know why." A longer pause. Then, "That file's restricted. Even to former COs. You're already being flagged." "Then flag me twice," Reyes snapped. "This kid's alive." "And someone sent 2 operatives to abduct or kill him. I stopped them. I've got dogs from Echo units still operational." "Jesus, you're sitting on a burning pile." Which is why I need you to send me every record you can before I'm cut off, the voice sighed. Check your inbox in 10 minutes, but Reyes ... Be careful. If Echo's active again, it's not just about rogue dogs. There's funding, contracts, private stakeholders. You're not just facing ghosts, you're facing a machine. She ended the call and waited. The data dump came fast. She scanned files, reports, surveillance logs, and internal communications. Then she saw it. Subject: Devalinta cognitive observation candidate. Echo pattern response: high compatibility asset behavior consistent with elevated empathy resonance. Capable of nonverbal cohesion with trained units. Recommended for retention or disposal post-field testing. Her blood ran cold. Daniel wasn't just a witness. He was part of the program. They had used him as a behavioral control variable to see if dogs like Maximus could bond, follow, and protect without verbal command. And when the data proved too successful, they tried to erase it. Erase him. She printed the file and marched upstairs. Daniel was sitting near the fire, sketching the dogs in a tattered notebook Marta had packed for him. Reyes placed the page in front of him. He read it twice. Then said nothing. I didn't want to show you this, she said, but you need to know. You weren't just collateral damage. You were part of it. He looked up. They used me? She nodded. Double quotes. They made me a test? Yes. Tears welled in his eyes, not of fear, but rage. That's why they put me in that room. Why they brought the dogs in. They wanted to see if I could control them. They didn't believe dogs could form emotional bonds strong enough to override conditioning, Reyes said. But Maximus did. The others followed. Daniel whispered. They protected me from the men in the black coats. That's when everything went wrong. One of the dogs attacked a guard. After that, they separated us. Maximus found you again, she said. Yeah, he breathed. He always does. That night Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked into the clearing alone, the full moon casting long silver beams across the frost-covered ground. The forest was too still. Maximus joined him moments later, nudging his shoulder. I know what they did to you, Daniel whispered. And I know what they tried to do to me. The other dogs joined, circling loosely around them like silent shadows. Daniel looked to Maximus. You saved me once, but now I want to help you. Maximus's ears perked up. I want to fight back. Bark echoed through the clearing. A single, sharp sound, not from Maximus, but from the youngest shepherd, a female Daniel had named Shadow. It was the first time she'd made a sound. One bark. One answer. In the trees beyond the station, a pair of eyes watched through binoculars. A radio clicked on. The boy's alive. The asset is responsive. And the pack is intact. A distorted voice replied, Good. Proceed with Phase 2. No more testing. Eliminate the asset. Retrieve the alpha. The voice paused. And Reyes? She's expendable. Part 8. Into the silence. Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. By dawn, he was already awake, sitting on the cabin porch with Maximus pressed close, and Shadow curled protectively at his feet. The cold bit through his borrowed sweater, but he didn't notice. His eyes stayed locked on the tree line. The forest was too quiet. Inside, Captain Reyes was moving with practiced urgency. The previous night's decrypted files were spread across the table, some stained with coffee, others circled and marked with notes. At the center of it all was one thing, a list of names. Daniel's name was on it. In bold, underlined, primary threat, terminate if recovered. Reyes hadn't told him about that last part. Not yet. She wasn't sure if she ever should. Instead, she packed water, MREs, ammo, gauze, and encrypted drives. She loaded her sidearm, slung the rifle, and checked the old Sataplint terminal one last time. At 7:14 a.m., it beeped softly. A signal. She froze. It wasn't a message. It was an alert from a long-forgotten camera rig buried near the old trail leading to the ranger station. Motion-detection.Reyes. Keyed it open. A man appeared on screen, black tactical gear, face exposed. Gray hair. Under a black cap. He stared directly into the lens, then raised his hand in a mock salute and walked out of frame. Her stomach turned. They'd been found. Within 10 minutes. Reyes had Daniel and the dogs geared to move. They took only what they could carry. Essentials, weapons, and the encrypted echo files. Daniel wore a small pack, his chest tight but determined. Maximus walked at his side, silent as ever. Shadow flanked them. Ghost, Rex, and the others formed a perimeter, one front, two rear, one high alert, sniffing and scanning for movement. They didn't speak. The silence was their only ally now. Reyes led them deep into the forest using a route only she knew. An old firewatch trail winding up the ridge. Steep, overgrown, forgotten. They hiked for 2 hours without rest, lungs burning, boots slipping on loose frost at the top of the incline. Reyes pulled them behind a thicket and gave the signal. To halt. Below, half buried in rock and moss, sat a narrow cave mouth. She had used it once during a survival op years ago. Dry, sheltered, and nearly invisible from the outside. Take cover. Quiet, she ordered. They crawled inside. The dogs went first, Daniel second, Reyes last. Once inside, she pulled brush across the entrance and positioned a motion sensor outside. Only then did they breathe. Inside the cave, it was dark and cold, but safe. Daniel sat with his back to the wall, Maximus lying beside him. Reyes unrolled a weatherproof mat and laid out a map, lighting it with her small red lens flashlight. Daniel leaned closer. Do you think they followed us? I don't think. I know. Then why didn't we keep running? Because they're not tracking us. They're hurting us. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? They're not just trying to catch you. They're trying to see what you do next, where you go, who helps you. This isn't an ambush. It's a surveillance trap. And we walked right into it. Reyes nodded grimly. But this time, we'll spring it on our terms. They stayed hidden for most of the day. Daniel shared jerky with the dogs, who chewed in complete silence. Occasionally, one of them would lift their head and sniff the air, always listening, always watching. It was near dusk when the whine of a drone cut through the forest. Outside, Reyes cursed. They hugged the walls of the cave as the small black device buzzed past the entrance. Reyes reached for her signal scrambler, but it was too late. The drone snapped a photo and zipped skyward. They know, she whispered. What do we do? Daniel asked. We prepare. That night, Reyes and Daniel fortified the cave entrance. She planted spike traps and concealed tripwires with leaves and snow. The dogs set up in defensive positions, Maximus and Ghost near the front, Rex circling, Shadow and Luna guarding Daniel. Inside, Daniel read through one of the decrypted files again. He didn't understand every line, but he understood enough. Subject: D. Valinti. Nonverbal synchronization with echo assets remains unprecedented. Emotional resonance response greater than 92%. Recommend suppression and memory wipe. If non-compliant, terminate. He looked up at Reyes. They never planned to let me go, she sighed. No, you were never meant to survive, but you did. That makes you dangerous. Do you think they're scared of me? She thought about it, then said, I think they're scared of what you represent. Daniel nodded slowly, then whispered, then let's give them a reason. At midnight, Reyes spotted movement near the perimeter alarm. 3 figures. No lights, no sound. Black uniforms. Tactical rifles, but these weren't mercs or bounty hunters. These were echo agents, clean, silent, methodical. She aimed through the scope of her suppressed rifle. Her breath slowed. Heart steady. One shot, one down. The second moved fast. She fired again. Missed. Go, she yelled back. They found us. Daniel grabbed his pack and turned to help Maximus, but the dog was already moving, urging him down the side path Reyes had shown earlier, a narrow cut in the rocks leading into a ravine. Third man appeared at the cave entrance. Ghost hit him like a missile. Snarls, screams, a gurgle, then silence. Reyes regrouped with Daniel halfway down the ridge. We have to keep moving. They'll send more. Daniel didn't argue. But he did ask, what if they catch us? Reyes looked at him. Then we fight, and we don't go down quietly. Maximus barked once, low and sharp. The message was clear. Not this time. Part 9. Fire in the pines. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting pale light across the frozen forest floor. Steam curled from the breath of man and dog alike. The pack moved silently, weaving through the undergrowth, every sense sharp. They had escaped the cave, but barely 2 echo agents were down. But Reyes knew that meant little. For every pair they dropped, 4 more would replace them. These weren't bounty hunters or rogue operatives. They were Black Ops trained, funded, and given full authority to erase anything connected to Project Echo. And that included Daniel. She could see it in his face now. He wasn't scared anymore. He was angry, awake. As they crossed a frozen creek, Daniel stopped and looked at Maximus limping behind him. Blood soaked the dog's left leg. Not life-threatening yet, but it was slowing him down. We have to stop, Daniel said. Reyes scanned the woods. We're still exposed. He can't keep running like this. The rest of the pack fanned out in a protective circle, forming a live perimeter. Reyes didn't like it, but she nodded. 5 minutes. They ducked into a hollow at the base of a split pine tree. Reyes knelt beside Maximus and inspected the wound. It was a clean graze, but deep. Daniel watched her hands move with calm, clinical precision, pulling gauze, disinfectant, and a tiny surgical needle from her med kit. You've done this before, he said. She nodded. Afghanistan, Syria, and once in Kentucky on a rescue dog named Murphy. Did they all make it? She didn't answer. Maximus didn't flinch as she cleaned the wound. Good soldier, she whispered. Daniel looked down at the bloodied fur. Why do they want him so bad? Reyes wrapped the leg. Because he didn't break. He disobeyed. He bonded. He chose you. She stood. That scares them more than anything. By early morning, snow began to fall, soft and slow at first, then heavier. It muffled sound and obscured footprints. Useful for cover, but dangerous for warmth and movement. They headed southeast toward a waypoint Reyes had marked days ago. An old fire watch tower, abandoned but elevated. If they could reach it, they'd have visibility and high ground. 2 hours in, Ghost, the fastest and most sensitive of the pack, stopped cold and growled. Reyes raised her fist. Everyone froze. Then came the sound. A click, faint but unmistakable. Daniel's heart pounded. A tripwire. Reyes scanned the trees there. A drone, barely visible through the snow. Too late. The drone snapped a photo and rocketed skyward. Reyes. Cursed, Daniel's fists clenched. They're never going to stop. No, she said. They're not. They reached the tower just before noon. It stood tall among the trees, old but stable. The spiral staircase creaked under their weight. The dog stayed below, guarding the base. Inside. Reyes immediately set up a watchpost, binoculars, rifle, solar charger for her uplink. A paper map with new notations drawn in Daniel's hand. He looked through the rifle scope and spotted movement. A mile out, 3 figures in black. How do they always find us? He asked. They've got satellite feeds, bio-trackers, hell, maybe even behavioral prediction algorithms. That's not fair. No, she said. But it's the deal. Game we're in. Daniel stood up. Then let's change the game. Reyes turned, curious. He pulled something from his pocket. It was the old ID tag Maximus once wore in the military. He kept this, even after everything. That means something. He knelt beside Maximus. You're not just a tool. You're Family, and we're not running anymore. The dog licked his hand. Reyes watched. There was something growing in the boy, something she'd seen before. In soldiers. In leaders. Resolve. At sunset, the woods ignited. Not from bombs or flashbangs, but from fire. A wall of flame erupted to the west. Backburn, Reyes said immediately. They're flushing us out. Smoke began to fill the air. The wind shifted, sharply bringing heat and sparks. Daniel coughed, pulling Shadow close. They're going to trap us. Reyes grabbed her gear. We move east now. They raced down the tower, dogs first, Reyes behind Daniel. The forest was chaos, glowing embers falling like burning snowflakes, smoke curling through the trees. As they sprinted, Maximus suddenly veered off the path, barking. Wait! Daniel shouted. Maximus charged through a wall of smoke, disappearing into the woods. Reyes shouted, We can't! But Daniel had already followed. He stumbled into a small clearing and froze. There he was, the man from his nightmares. The handler in black gloves. Face older now, but unmistakable. He stood calmly, as if waiting. You came back, the man said. Daniel clenched his fists. You left me there. It wasn't personal. You were just a variable. I'm not a number. No, the man admitted. You're a control experiment that got out of control. Daniel stepped forward. Why do they want Maximus? The man smiled. Because he broke every rule. He protected you when his orders said otherwise. That scared the brass. They'd rather erase him than admit the project worked too well. A low growl came from the trees. Maximus emerged, limping but steady. The man raised a weapon too slow. Shadow lunged from the side, a blur of fur. Teeth and rage. He screamed as she sank her teeth into his arm. Maximus followed, biting, snapping, his body driven by instinct and memory and love. Daniel turned away as the man fell. Reyes appeared seconds later, out of breath, gun drawn. You okay? Daniel looked up at her. They tried to turn him into a weapon, Reyes nodded grimly. And he became something better. They left the handler alive, barely. Daniel dropped a signal flare beside him, lit it, and walked away without a word. As they disappeared into the trees, Maximus leaned into Daniel's leg. And for the first time since his rescue, the boy whispered, I'm ready to fight. Part 10. Whispers in the dark. The night air settled heavy around the farmhouse. Even with the dogs stationed like loyal sentries around the property, an eerie sense of unease clung to the place like fog. Jacob sat by the window, his eyes never leaving the tree line. He gripped the rifle in his hands, not out of fear, but out of preparation. Whatever or whoever had made its way this close to the child before. It wasn't done yet. Down the hall, inside the warmly lit living room, Mia lay on the couch wrapped in blankets. Her small frame twitched occasionally as she dreamed, whispering incoherent words. Max sat beside her, one ear always tilted toward the hallway, his amber eyes fixed on any flicker of movement. Ella approached quietly, a steaming mug in her hands. Here, she said gently, handing the drink to Jacob. Chamomile. I figured if we're going to keep watch, we need something to stay grounded. He took it, nodding. Thanks. They stood in silence, sipping slowly. Outside, the German shepherds prowled the edges of the property. Coda gave a short, low bark and the others responded in kind. It wasn't an alarm, not yet. But it meant they sensed something, a change in the air, a tension rising. I don't get it, Ella finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. What kind of person leaves a child in the middle of the road? And how do these dogs know her? Jacob rubbed a hand over his face, sighing. I've been asking myself the same thing. They're trained, yes, but this goes deeper than instinct. It's like they recognized her, protected her like their own. Maybe they do know her, Ella suggested. Before she ended up out there, maybe something happened. Something bad. Jacob gave a slow nod. That's what worries me." They both looked over as Max let out a low growl, rising to his feet. He stood rigid, eyes locked on the window. Ears perked like satellite dishes picking up an unknown frequency. "What is it, boy?" Jacob whispered, setting the mug down and moving toward the door. Outside, the moon had risen higher, casting silvery shadows across the field. The other dogs had formed a tighter perimeter, a subtle shift, but a meaningful one. Something was out there or coming. Downstairs, Ethan hunched over his laptop, trying to trace the markings from the girl's locket. The insignia etched on the back wasn't decorative. It was official looking. A combination of letters and numbers wrapped in a circular design. He cross-referenced military, federal, even obscure intelligence agencies. He found a partial match. Buried deep in a restricted archive, tagged to a now-defunct paramilitary program. But before he could click further, the screen flashed red. Access restricted, classified record. Ethan's heart rate spiked. Another message appeared, more ominous. Unauthorized inquiry flagged. Authorities will be notified. Damn it, he muttered, yanking the laptop's battery out before any more digital fingerprints could be left behind. He stared at the screen in silence. Whatever this was, it was way bigger than a missing child dot in the haze of sleep. Mia wasn't resting. Easy. She walked down a corridor of white walls and echoing footsteps. A man with sharp eyes and a silver badge crouched in front of her, smiling gently. "We're going to keep you safe, okay?" She nodded. But then, the air grew cold. Another man emerged, taller, his face obscured, but his presence oppressive. He wore a black suit, and his voice was soft like a serpent's hiss. "You belong to us now." She turned and tried to run, but her legs felt like stone. Shadows wrapped around her ankles, pulling her back. The walls closed in. Suddenly, Max appeared in her dream, larger than life, barking furiously. He leapt between her and the figure, his teeth bared, his growl vibrating through the dream world. The man stepped back into the dark as Max stood guard. Mia jolted awake with a gasp. Max was at her side, just as in the dream, his fur bristling. His eyes scanned the room before relaxing slightly. Ella rushed over. "It's okay, honey, it's okay. You were just dreaming." Mia clutched her locket tightly, her voice small and shaking. "He's coming." "Who is?" Ella asked, brushing Mia's damp hair from her forehead. "The man with no name," Mia whispered. "He found me before. He said I don't get to choose where I belong." That same night, in a darkened office far away, a secure phone rang. Voice answered. Calm, cold. A distorted voice on the other end said, "We have a breach. The child has resurfaced. Location confirmed." A pause. "Yes. Dispatch recovery team Alpha. Eliminate the dogs if necessary. Retrieve the girl. Burn everything else." The line went dead, and the hunt began. Part 11. The signal in the storm warning came, but it brought no peace. A gray overcast smothered the sky, casting the land in a dull light. The dogs remained alert, moving in organized patterns along the perimeter. Jacob hadn't slept his instincts. Wouldn't let him. And now, they were ringing louder than ever. Ella stirred in the kitchen, making breakfast with robotic movements, her eyes constantly flicking to the windows. Mia sat quietly at the table, her hands cupped around a warm glass of milk. She hadn't spoken much since waking up from the nightmare. Ethan came up the basement stairs with a pale face. He held a piece of paper in his hand, the printed screenshot from the restricted site he accessed, before yanking the battery from his laptop. "You're gonna want to see this," he said, sliding the sheet across the table toward Jacob. Jacob squinted at it. The insignia from Mia's locket matched a logo from a discontinued Black Ops project. Project Kestrel. "That's military," Jacob muttered, his voice tense. "More than military," Ethan replied. "It was covert, off the books kind of thing." Supposedly shut down 5 years ago. What was it about? Ethan hesitated, then whispered, child enhancement, experiments, genetic conditioning, assisted training regimens. They were turning orphans into ... assets. Mia might be one of them. Ella gasped. That's insane. She's just a little girl. Jacob's fists clenched. That's why they want her back. A sudden thud outside made everyone jump. Jacob dashed to the window. One of the dogs' Ranger was sprinting back toward the house, barking frantically. What is it, boy? What do you see? The bark was different, not fearful. A warning. Seconds later, the power flickered, and then went out. The house fell into silence, save for the low growls of the dogs outside. Jacob moved fast, grabbing his emergency radio. Ethan, the generator. I'm on it, Ethan said, bolting for the side door. Ella stood protectively in front of Mia, who looked visibly shaken. The man with no name, Mia murmured. He's close. Jacob got the radio working, static, then a sharp clicking sound followed by a modulated voice. You are harboring federal property. Surrender the asset. Jacob froze. What the hell? You have 30 minutes before we breach. He killed the radio and turned to the others. They're here. Outside, in the dense woods just beyond the farmland, a sleek black vehicle sat idle beneath camouflage netting. Inside, men dressed in tactical gear reviewed blueprints of the farmhouse. Their gear bore no insignia, their weapons custom-built for silent entry. At the center of the team stood Commander Nash, a cold-eyed operative with a scar running down his temple. He studied the aerial drone footage on a tablet. Dogs large. Ones circled the property. Scramble their communications, he ordered. EMP if necessary. And the child? A soldier asked. Alive, but if those animals resist? He paused. You know the protocol. Back at the farmhouse, Ethan returned. Generators fried. EMP hit it hard. We've got no power, no comms. Jacob nodded grimly. They're trying to isolate us. Max, Coda, Ranger, and the rest of the dogs gathered outside the front porch, forming a tight wall of fur and muscle. Their postures were rigid, ready. They could feel the tension, the unseen threat encroaching. Ella knelt beside Mia. Sweetheart, can you tell us anything else about them? About where you came from? Mia hesitated, then slowly opened her locket. Inside, instead of a photo, was a microchip embedded in the casing. I don't remember everything, she whispered. But I know this. This holds the truth. About me, about them, about what they did. Ethan leaned in, stunned. That chip could expose the entire program. Jacob stood tall, checking the ammunition in his rifle. Then we protect it. And her. He moved to the dogs, crouching beside Max. You ready for a fight, boy? Max let out a low bark. In the distance, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Drones. Two black reconnaissance drones hovered above the treetops, scanning infrared and movement. The dogs snarled and barked, reacting instantly. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed the first shot. It missed, but it signaled the beginning. Jacob yelled, Positions! Keep Mia safe! Don't let them take her! The farmhouse became a fortress. The family, the dogs, the mystery girl, all united by fate and ready to face the storm that had finally arrived. Part 12. First Contact. The first shot had barely cracked through the air before the dogs erupted into coordinated motion. Max led the charge, barking furiously toward the tree line while Coda and Ranger flanked left and right, herding the others into position. The farmhouse became a battlefield in seconds, with instincts sharper than any human alarm system. Inside, Jacob bolted the front door and barked orders. Ella, upstairs with Mia now. Ethan, you're with me. We hold them at the porch. Ella didn't argue. She swept Mia into her arms and rushed up the stairs as the little girl clutched the locket tightly to her chest. Her eyes were wide with fear, But there was something else flickering there, awareness, memory perhaps, as if some part of her was preparing for what came next. Jacob and Ethan crouched behind the heavy wooden kitchen island that now served as cover. Jacob peeked through the window. Black figures advanced. 3 of them, dressed in tactical suits that absorbed the surrounding shadows. Silent, swift, and efficient. Not military, something else. Something colder. Ethan whispered. How the hell did they get here so fast? They were already looking. The second you touched that database, they locked on. EMP hit the generator. That means they're not trying to just take her back, they're covering their tracks. A dog barked savagely outside. Then a yelp, Jacob's. Face hardened. They're engaging our line. Outside, the dogs didn't run. They defended. Max lunged at the first figure that broke through the trees, sinking his teeth into the man's forearm and dragging him down. Coda tackled a second one, knocking him flat before another assailant fired a tranquilizer round. Ranger darted between attackers, a phantom in the mist, biting at exposed joints, dodging swings of batons and flashbangs. The dogs weren't just animals, they were trained protectors, born of loyalty and fire. But the attackers were prepared. One by one, stun devices were launched, silent discharges that sent pulses of electric pain through flesh and fur. Max growled through the burning sensation and refused to fall. Not yet. Upstairs, Ella sealed the bedroom door and shoved a dresser in front of it. She sat on the floor with Mia, trying to calm her breathing. We're safe here, sweetie. They won't get through. Mia's gaze was locked on the window. Yes, they will. They always do. They come when it's dark. When I sleep. Ella's voice softened. Who are they? Mia swallowed hard. They're the ones who made me forget. They told me I wasn't real, that I was built to serve. She opened the locket again and tapped the chip inside. It's not just information. It's a trigger. It wakes up memories they tried to erase. Ella felt a chill run through her spine. What kind of memories? Before Mia could answer, the bedroom window shattered. A drone crashed through, spraying glass and flashing lights. Ella screamed and shielded Mia, but the girl reacted faster, diving to the side and rolling under the bed with practiced agility. The drone released a canister. Thick smoke filled the room, but as it did, something remarkable happened from beneath the bed. Mia held the locket toward the smoke. A light blinked. The drone's red-eye sensor flickered, then powered down. It hit the floor with a thud. Downstairs, Jacob heard the crash and shouted, Ella! He kicked open the back door just as another figure tried to breach it, catching the attacker off guard with a rifle butt to the gut. Ethan pulled him back inside, slamming the door shut and bolting it. We're outnumbered, Ethan hissed. Then we don't play defense anymore, Jacob said, chest rising and falling with purpose. We fight back. He loaded a fresh magazine and motioned to the side window. 3 more figures were circling toward the garage. Jacob flanked one with precision, squeezing the trigger and dropping him with a non-lethal shot to the leg. He didn't want bodies, he wanted answers. Max limped to the porch, bruised but standing. His fur was scorched in patches, but his eyes were still ablaze. Jacob knelt beside him. Good boy. Let's finish this. Upstairs, the smoke cleared. Ella crawled to the drone, flipping it over. The locket still open and Mia's hand had transmitted something. Maybe a code. Maybe a virus. Whatever it was, it had shut the drone down. Ella stared at Mia in awe. What did you do? I don't know, Mia whispered. But I remember, someone told me I was special. That if they ever came back, I had to protect myself. That's what the dogs are for. Ella blinked. Wait, they weren't just guarding you. They were assigned to you? Mia nodded. We were trained together. They never forgot. Part 12, First Contact. The first shot had barely cracked through the air before the dogs erupted into coordinated motion. Max led the charge, barking furiously toward the tree line while Coda and Ranger flanked left and right, herding the others into position. The farmhouse became a battlefield in seconds, with instincts sharper than any human alarm system. Inside, Jacob bolted the front door and barked orders. "Ella, upstairs with Mia now. Ethan, you're with me. We hold them at the porch." Ella didn't argue. She swept Mia into her arms and rushed up the stairs as the little girl clutched the locket tightly to her chest. Part 13. The interrogation that captured Operative sat bound to a wooden chair in the center of the living room, his wrists zip-tied and a cut above his right eye slowly leaking blood. His black tactical uniform bore no insignia, but Jacob could tell from the man's posture, the way he scanned the room even under pressure. This was no amateur. He was trained, elite, possibly special forces at some point. Max sat nearby, growling low and constant. His gaze never left the man's throat. Ethan stood against the wall, arms crossed, the broken drone in his hands. Whatever tech they're using, it's beyond standard. This drone has military-grade AI. Ella stood behind the couch, keeping Mia out of view. The little girl held onto her locket tightly, her small fingers trembling, but her face calm, eerily calm. Jacob paced slowly in front of the prisoner. "Talk," he said simply. The man said nothing. Jacob stopped. "You came onto private land armed. You attacked a child and her protectors. That's terrorism in my book." Still, silence. Max took a single step forward, and the man flinched ever so slightly. "You're not official," Jacob continued. "You've got no markings, your gear's sterilized, and your extraction failed. That means you're isolated, which means you're expendable." That struck a nerve. The operative's jaw tightened. She was never supposed to make it this far. Jacob's eyes narrowed. "Who is she?" The man looked past him, toward the staircase. He couldn't see Mia, but he knew she was there. "She's not just a child," he said flatly. "She's the last one." Jacob exchanged a look with Ethan. "The last what?" Ethan asked. The operative smirked. "Project Kestrel was terminated 5 years ago. Shutdown orders. Total liquidation. But one subject escaped during the purge. A girl. That girl." Ella's breath caught in her throat. Mia looked up at her with wide eyes but didn't speak. Jacob pressed further. "Why was the project shut down?" "It worked too well," the man said. "The kids, they weren't just trained, they were enhanced. Biometric manipulation, neurological implants, behavioral control. Most of them cracked, but Subject 9 didn't. She adapted. She became something else." Jacob stiffened. "Subject 9 is Mia?" The man nodded slowly. "She disappeared during a transport. Internal. Cover-up blamed it on equipment malfunction, but we knew someone helped her escape. One of the scientists. He embedded a key into her locket. That chip in there. It's the kill switch and the map to everything." Ella looked down at Mia, whose hands clutched the locket like it was part of her body. "They called it a containment breach," the operative continued. "But we knew what it really was. Hope escaping. The only mistake we made was not sending a team sooner." Jacob stepped forward. "You're not sending anyone else." "Doesn't matter," the operative said, smiling bitterly. "You've already triggered the failsafe." Ethan's head shot up. "Failsafe?" The man looked up at them, his tone now grave. "They embedded a neural signature tracker in all subjects. If one reactivates by unlocking suppressed memories or using embedded tech, it alerts the primary server. If that happens, a sweep unit is deployed, fully armed, no restraint protocols." Jacob swore under his breath. "How long do we have?" The man shrugged. "If the EMP was already deployed and the first team failed, you've got less than 12 hours before they send in Black Echo." "What the hell is Black Echo?" Ella asked. "Not a recovery team," the man said. A deletion squad. They don't leave evidence. They wipe the area and everyone in it. Mia stepped into view, trembling but upright. Her voice was soft, but clear. I remember them. Everyone turned to her. She walked toward the prisoner and stood a few feet away. Black Echo wears gray masks. They don't speak. They don't hesitate. They took my friends, one by one. The operative blinked. You remember? I remember all of it now, Mia said. The needles, the silence, the cold rooms, the obedience drills. But I also remember the man who let me go, Dr. Cohn. He told me I had to run, that if I made it far enough, I'd find people who would protect me. She looked up at Jacob. I found them. The room was still. Then Jacob broke the silence. We need to move, Ella frowned. Where? We can't hold off a military sweep, not with dogs and bolt locks. We need allies. People off the grid. Like me, old friends. One of them has a secure location underground. No signal trace, no satellite line. Part 13. The interrogation that captured operative sat bound to a wooden chair in the center of the living room. His wrists zip-tied and a cut above his right eye slowly leaking blood. His black tactical uniform bore no insignia, but Jacob could tell from the man's posture, the way he scanned the room even under pressure. This was no amateur. He was trained, elite, possibly special forces at some point. Max sat nearby, growling low and constant. His gaze never left the man's throat. Ethan stood against the wall, arms crossed, the broken drone in his hands. Whatever tech they're using, it's beyond standard. This drone has military-grade AI. Ella stood behind the couch, keeping Mia out of view. The little girl held onto her locket tightly, her small finger. Part 14. A place beyond the signal. The tires crunched against gravel as the battered pickup truck sped down the back roads of the countryside, a storm of dust rising in its wake. Jacob gripped the steering wheel with one hand and held a pistol in the other, resting it against the dashboard. His eyes scanned every turn in the road, every line in the trees. Mia sat in the back seat, nestled between Ella and Ethan. Max lay at her feet, his head resting gently on her lap, eyes open and ears twitching. Behind them, Coda and Ranger ran alongside the truck, never straying more than a few feet, refusing to be left behind. The captured operative was tied in the bed of the truck, gagged, blindfolded, and surrounded by two other dogs watching him closely. He'd been stripped of any gear that could be tracked. Thought they were heading north toward the mountains. You think your contact will take us in? Ethan asked, shouting over the wind. He will, Jacob replied. I saved his life in Kandahar. We've been square ever since, but this'll be a favor he won't refuse. Who is he? Name's Ronan. Used to be deep intel, NSA level. Went dark after a bad op exposed how corrupt the upper command was. Built himself a bunker in the Rockies off-grid, EMP shielded, no satellites, no cell towers. Places like a ghost to the world. Ella kept a tight hold on Mia's shoulders. Good, we need ghosts right now. Mia looked up. They're already following us. Jacob's jaw tightened. You're sure? I can feel them, she whispered. They've been trained to move in shadows. I know their pattern. The signal's active. I activated it. Ethan turned toward her. Do you remember how to shut it down? Mia shook her head slowly. They made sure we couldn't. Jacob didn't answer. He just pressed harder on the gas. Hours later, they pulled off the main road, following the dirt path hidden beneath a thicket of trees. The sky had turned deep gray, a slow drizzle falling as the elevation climbed. The dogs seemed to know they were nearing safety. They quieted. Focused. The truck rolled to a stop in front of what looked like a sheer cliff wall. Nothing stood out except a patch of moss-covered stone. Jacob got out, approached a flat rock, and knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. A small infrared scanner popped out from the stone, scanning his face. A green light flashed, moments. Later the cliff began to shift. A hidden metal door, disguised with rock and lichen, slid open with a low hiss, revealing a tunnel lit by dim red lights. Ethan blinked. "Well, I'll be damned," Jacob motioned. "Let's move." They drove the truck inside. The door closed behind them, and silence fell. The bunker was impressive concrete walls 2 feet thick, layered with copper mesh and insulation, computers, surveillance monitors, backup generators, food storage, and even kennels lined one wing. Ronan emerged from a side room. He was in his late 40s, rugged, with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes that didn't miss a thing. A sidearm rested on his hip, and a thick scar ran down the back of his neck. "Took you long enough," he said. Jacob gave a half-smile. "I come bearing gifts. You always do." Ronan looked past him, locking eyes on Mia. "Is that the girl?" "She's more than a girl," Jacob said. "She's a target. And a key." Ronan stepped closer, studying Mia with a soldier's eye. "I've seen the Kestrel files. Didn't think any of the kids survived." "She did," Ethan said. "And she brought the kill switch." He held out the locket. Ronan took it carefully, eyes narrowing as he examined it. "I'll get it into a Faraday cage. If it's broadcasting, we'll kill it." Mia stepped forward. "You can't stop the signal, but maybe you can redirect it." Ronan looked at her. "You remember your training?" "Not all of it," she replied, "but enough. If I access the right node, I can reroute the pin to a dummy server." "That buys us time," Jacob said, "but not much. A team's already inbound. They'll hit the farmhouse first," Ronan said, "and find it burned. That'll stall them. But if you want to expose this thing, you need proof. Documents, logs, anything from the facility they used." "There's a lab," Mia said, "underground, hidden beneath the school they used to train us. The vault holds everything. Dr. Cohn said that if I ever found people I could trust, I had to go back and get the truth." "Where is it?" Ronan asked. Mia hesitated, then pointed to a map Ronan unrolled on the Part 14. "A place beyond the signal." The tires crunched against gravel as the battered pickup truck sped down the back roads of the countryside, a storm of dust rising in its wake. Jacob gripped the steering wheel with one hand and held a pistol in the other, resting it against the dashboard. His eyes scanned every turn in the road, every line in the trees. Mia sat in the back seat, nestled between Ella and Ethan. Max lay at her feet, his head resting gently on her lap, eyes open and ears twitching. Behind them, Coda and Ranger ran alongside the truck, never straying more than a few feet, refusing to be left behind. The captured operative was tied in the bed of the truck, gagged, blindfolded, and surrounded by 2 other dogs watching him closely. He'd been stripped of any gear. Part 15. Ghosts of Reedridge. There inside the bunker was still, but the tension was electric. Ronan stood over a long metal table strewn with maps, printed satellite images, and crude hand-drawn schematics of the Redridge Academy, a facility long rumored to be abandoned, but never truly forgotten by those who once knew what lived beneath it. Jacob leaned against the wall nearby, arms crossed, eyes scanning every inch of the plan. Beside him, Ethan was already rigging the decrypted locket to a portable data terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Mia sat in silence, eyes down, as if staring into a void only she could see. Any luck unlocking the full contents of the chip? Jacob asked Ethan without turning. "Working on it," Ethan muttered. "Whatever encryption they used, its adaptive reconfigures every time I get close. But it's unraveling." Ronan walked over and placed a hand on Mia's shoulder. "If we're going back to Redridge, we'll need to be ghosts, full infiltration, zero noise, zero mistakes. That means you'll have to lead us through it." Mia looked up at him. "I can, you sure? I remember where they kept the kids who didn't make it. Where they trained us, where the vault is. I can get us in." Ronan nodded. Then we leave at nightfall. In a nearby room, the captive operative sat bound to a chair, his hands now tied behind his back with reinforced cuffs. A dim light hung overhead, swaying slightly from the ventilation above. Max sat in the corner, watching him with unblinking intensity. Ronan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "No mask now," he said casually, pulling up a chair. "That means we don't need to pretend this is civilized." The operative smirked faintly. "You're wasting time." Ronan leaned in. "I know who you are, Darrow. Former Delta, real name, Alan Darrow. You vanished after the Caracas incident, 2 agents dead, 1 facility torched. They said you died in the blast, but here you are, crawling back out of the shadows." Darrow flinched. "You're not a loyal soldier anymore," Ronan continued. "You're a loose end. So tell me something useful before the people you work for come clean you up." Darrow looked up slowly, his voice flat. "Redridge has 3 underground levels. The vault's at the bottom. You won't get near it without the override codes or Subject 9. She's with us," Ronan said. "That's how we're going to get in." Darrow's eyes darkened. "They'll never let her live." Max growled low, stepping forward. Darrow shifted in his seat. "Start drawing the layout," Ronan said, tossing a pen and pad in front of him. "And don't leave out the defenses, or I'll let the dog ask the questions." As darkness fell, the group gathered near the bunkers. Exit tunnel. Jacob checked his rifle, sliding in a fresh magazine. "Non-lethal if we can manage. We get what we need, we disappear." "Once I download the full archive from Redridge's vault," Ethan said, strapping a data box to his chest, "I can broadcast it to every open network left on the grid. If there's proof in there, abuse, experimentation, murder, it'll be out in the world before they can bury it again." Mia was already dressed in tactical black, her eyes sharp with purpose. Ella looked at her nervously. "Are you sure you're ready?" Mia gave a small nod. "I have to be." Coda, Ranger, and Max stood at her side like a personal guard. "She's not going in alone," Jacob said. "We all go." Ronan turned to a hidden wall panel and keyed in the sequence. The rock-covered exit slid open, revealing the cold night beyond. "Redridge is 6 hours east. We move under cover of dark and strike." At dawn, Jacob glanced down at Mia. "You lead the way." 6 hours later, Redridge Academy rose from the forest like a relic of another world. The brick facade was cracked and moss-covered, windows shattered, vines choking its frame. It looked abandoned, forgotten. But Mia knew better. The group moved silently across the field, weaving between trees until they reached the fence. Ronan cut through it with electric shears. The dogs slithered in first, silent shadows. Mia moved with mechanical familiarity. "This way," she whispered, leading them along the side of the building. "There's a service tunnel beneath the east wing. It leads to the elevator." Inside the tunnel, the air was cold and damp. Mold clung to the walls. Broken lights buzzed overhead. Then they reached it, a rusted steel elevator door. A keypad. Mia approached and touched her locket to the panel. A click, the door opened. "Elevator still." "Works," Ethan whispered. "Unbelievable." "Some things were built to last," Ronan replied. They stepped inside. Part 15. Ghosts of Redridge. There inside the bunker was still, but the tension was electric. Ronan stood over a long metal table strewn with maps, printed satellite images, and crude hand-drawn schematics of the Redridge Academy, a facility long rumored to be abandoned, but never truly forgotten by those who once knew what lived beneath it. Jacob. Part 16. Initiation. The elevator jolted as it ground to a stop. A dull chime echoed in the shaft, and the metal doors slid open with a rusty groan, revealing a dim hallway bathed in flickering white lights. The walls were once sterile white but now stained with water damage and grime. Torn posters hung askew, displaying faded slogans. Potential is power. Compliance is safety. Mia stepped out first. Her boots made no sound on the concrete floor. The air was colder down here, as if the very structure was frozen in time and in something worse than memory. "This is where we learn to follow," Mia said quietly. "They called it level 1. We were kids, but they wanted us to act like soldiers. Sit, stand, salute, repeat. Anyone who hesitated was taken away." Jacob moved beside her, his rifle raised. "Taken where?" She pointed toward a corridor marked with a faded red line. "The holding cells. They use drugs to make kids obedient. I remember. Some never came back." Ronan motioned, with 2 fingers, signaling the group to split. "Ella, stay with Mia. Jacob, Ethan, you're with me. Max, Coda sweep ahead." The dogs padded into the shadows without hesitation. Their paws moved like ghosts over the floor, sniffing for any trace of movement or danger. Ella crouched beside Mia, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this alone." "I'm not alone anymore," Mia replied. "But I have to show you. There's something we need to find here before we go deeper." They turned down the corridor and stopped in front of a large door marked Internal Files, Archive a. It was sealed. Jacob examined the lock panel. "Manual override, old tech. I can pry it, but it'll take time." Ethan stepped forward, plugging his tablet into the side port. "Let me try a bypass first. If this panel's still tied into the main grid, I can trick it into thinking a security chief is accessing it." "You sure that won't alert anyone?" Ronan asked. "Not unless they're already listening." After a few tense seconds, the lock clicked, and the door swung inward. The room beyond was stacked with file cabinets, dusty shelves, and half-smashed computer terminals. Dozens of drawers were labeled with strings of numbers and code names. Mia walked straight to one of the cabinets and opened the top drawer. She rifled through files, her hands shaking until she pulled out a thin black folder. On the front, the label read, Subject 9, Initiation Profile. She opened it. Inside were photos her at 4 years old, smiling. Her at 6 with electrodes attached to her head. Then another at 7, expressionless, eyes empty. Ella turned away, unable to look. "They trained me to suppress fear," Mia whispered. "Not to be brave, but to forget how to be scared." Jacob looked through the other drawers. "There's hundreds of profiles here. All these kids. How many were there?" Ethan checked the master index. 72. Mia's the only one listed as unrecovered. "And what happened to the others?" Ronan asked. Mia answered softly. "Most were terminated. Some were sent to something called Black Echo." That name chilled the room. "They weren't just a cleanup squad," Ethan said. "They were former subjects," Mia nodded. "The best ones. The ones who didn't break." Jacob clenched his jaw. "So now they're using the program's victims as their enforcers." "Not victims," Mia corrected. "Weapons." A sudden growl echoed from the hallway. Max. Then a bark-sharp warning. Jacob and Ronan rushed to the corridor, rifles raised. At the far end of the hall, a figure stood. Still. Watching. Wearing a gray mask. Ronan pulled the trigger, but the figure moved, vanishing into the shadows like smoke. "Black Echo's here," Jacob said grimly. "They're already inside." Ella pulled Mia back. "We have to move." "No," Mia said, holding up the folder. "Not yet. There's a name in here. Dr. Cohn left a key." A password scrawled on the last page. She showed it to Ethan. "Root credentials," he whispered, stunned. "This could get us access to every security level below." "Then we're going to the vault," Jacob said. Ronan checked his weapon. "We stick close. No more splitting up. If Black Echo's hunting US, we move as one." The group gathered, the dogs falling into step. Behind them, the hallway lights began to flicker and dim. and from somewhere in the lower levels, a hollow voice whispered over the ancient intercom system, "Subject 9 detected. Proceeding with lockdown." Sequence. Steel shutters slammed shut behind them. They had no choice but to go forward, and what waited ahead wasn't just truth. It was everything they were never meant to survive. Part 17. Conditioning. The group pressed on. Steel shutters had closed behind them, sealing off their exit. The only way left was forward into the core of Redridge Academy, into the very place where children had been stripped of names and reprogrammed. Into weapons. The air grew colder as they descended a narrow stairwell. Red emergency lights glowed along the walls, casting their shadows long and unnatural. Everything hummed with electricity, like the facility itself had woken up after years of slumber. Mia walked with stiff posture, her small hand clenched around the locket. She knew this level. They all had once. "This is where they erased us," she whispered. "We weren't allowed to speak our names down here, only numbers." Ella's voice was barely audible. "What number were you?" 9. Ronan held up a fist, halting the group. He crouched and examined a narrow slit in the wall. "Motion sensor. Still active." Jacob leaned in. "Can we bypass it?" "No," Ronan said. "But we don't have to." He tossed a smoke pellet from his vest toward the far end of the corridor. It triggered the sensor, just long enough to send a harmless decoy down the hallway. They moved quickly, sticking to shadows, stepping over discarded 4 stands and old monitoring devices. Strange symbols were painted on the walls, faded now, likely psychological triggers from the conditioning exercises. Then they reached a large glass chamber. Inside were rows of desks, each with a chair bolted to the floor and restraints hanging off the sides. Headsets dangled above them like nooses. Large screens were mounted in front of every seat. Mia stopped. "I used to sit right there," she said, pointing to the second row. They played loops of battle footage, explosions, crying, children, fire. We had to sit still or be shocked. Jacob's stomach turned. Ethan scanned the room. "This looks like the neural reprogramming bay. They fed trauma into kids and trained them to not feel it." Mia nodded. "If you cried, you got double time. If you screamed, they recorded it." Ella looked at her. "How did you survive?" "I remembered who I was," Mia said. "Even when they tried to erase it, I had dreams. Dreams of a man with kind eyes, of a field, of a house with dogs. I held on to it." They moved past the chamber and found another locked door. This one had biometric sensors and a reinforced steel frame. "No keypads, no card slots." Ethan frowned. "This is advanced. We need a retina scan." Or Mia stepped forward and stood on her toes. A small lens blinked. A green light flashed. "Access granted." The door slid open. Jacob raised his rifle, stepping inside first. They were met with a humming room filled with vertical data towers, the walls pulsing with blue light. A central terminal stood in the middle of the room, waiting. Ethan moved to it and connected the locket. "All right," he muttered. "We're in." Mia walked beside him, eyes fixed on the terminal. Lines of code filled the screen. Ethan's eyes widened. This isn't just about you, Mia. It's everyone. 72 subjects, every detail, experiment logs, transfer schedules, kill orders, even field deployment notes for the ones who became Black Echo. Jacob stepped forward. "Can we copy it all?" "I already am," Ethan said, fingers dancing across the keys. "And once it's done, I can send it everywhere. Whistleblower forums, public data vaults, encrypted archives, even newsrooms. They'll never scrub it all." Ronan nodded. "Good, get it out." Suddenly, the screens flickered. A new feed appeared. A hallway camera, grainy black and white footage. And then a figure. Tall, silent, gray mask, walking calmly through the upper levels, followed by others. Black Echo had breached the facility. Ethan's voice shook. We've got 5, maybe 10 minutes tops before they're on us. Jacob turned to Ronan. How many ways out of here? 1. Ronan said. A tunnel that leads through the boiler access. We blow the old coolant vent and squeeze through. Mia didn't move. She stared at the monitor. Another window opened on the screen gave access to her own training logs. Video clips. Notes, biometric scans. She saw herself from the past, hunched in a chair, her face blank. Screaming in silence, bleeding during tests. Performing combat drills against dummies twice her size. Ella stepped closer, tearful. Mia, you don't need to see this. I do, Mia whispered. They tried to erase me, but this is the proof I existed. That I endured. That I remembered. She reached over and tapped the final command on the screen. Upload all files. A green progress bar appeared. 40%. 60, 75. Then the alarms went off. Jacob grabbed his rifle. We hold them just long enough. The dogs took position by the door. Their bodies tense. Ethan pulled the drive from the terminal. Backup secured. Ronan nodded. Move, now. The chamber door burst open. A flash of movement. And the first of the masked operatives stepped inside. Max lunged. Part 18. Unleashed. The sound of metal crashing against metal filled the chamber as Max launched himself at the intruder. The masked operative barely had time to raise his weapon before Max slammed into his chest, knocking him backward into a wall of servers. Sparks exploded on impact. Max's teeth found purchase, shredding the fabric of the man's armored vest as he roared with primal fury. Jacob opened fire next, squeezing off controlled bursts that drove the next 2 operatives back into the corridor. Ronan joined in from the far side of the room, his sidearm barking in short, calculated rhythm. Coda and Ranger flanked the doorway, snarling, hurting anyone who stepped too close into kill zones. Go, Jacob shouted. We hold them here. Get Mia to the tunnel. No, Mia cried. You'll be surrounded. I don't care, Jacob growled. You are the mission now. Everything else is secondary. Ella hesitated only for a second before grabbing Mia's hand and pulling her toward the far hatch. Ethan followed, still clutching the portable drive to his chest. The facility rumbled, either from gunfire or some deeper system, waking up from dormancy. In the control room, Max ripped off the mask of the fallen operative, revealing a face beneath, pale and scarred with surgical marks. The man was young, no older than 20. His eyes were blank, as if no soul remained. Just programming. Max hesitated. And the operative smiled. An unnatural twitch. A flashbang rolled into the room. Jacob dove forward, pulling Max down and shielding him. Boom. White light. Ringing. Confusion. By the time Jacob's vision cleared, 3 more members of Black Echo were pouring through the door, sweeping the room with near supernatural coordination. They weren't soldiers. They were machines in human form, trained not to feel, not to question, only to eliminate. But they hadn't trained against dogs like these. Ranger flew from the shadows, tackling one to the ground, jaws crushing through composite armor. Coda followed, biting into the leg of another, twisting and ripping with a terrifying growl. Jacob rose again, covering the door as Ronan pulled a shaped charge from his vest. We can't hold this for long. Ronan barked. Tunnel's our only shot. Jacob nodded. Set it. Ronan placed the charge at the side door they hadn't yet opened, an emergency coolant vent that led to a filtration corridor beyond the vault. Meant for maintenance, big. Enough for 1 person at a time. In the hallway beyond, the sound of synchronized boots echoed closer. Jacob looked at Max. Time to go, boy. Max barked once and turned to help herd the others toward the back. Mia ran through the narrow corridor ahead of the others. Red emergency lights pulsed above, and steam hissed from old pipes along the walls. Ella kept her hand tight around the girl's shoulder, Heart-pounding dot behind them, Ethan shouted. The upload finished. Even if they kill us, it's too late. The truth is out. They reached the end of the tunnel, a bolted hatch. Ronan's voice crackled over the cum. Stand clear. Then an explosion ripped through the steel, blasting the hatch open and sending debris across the hallway. Smoke poured out, mixing with the mist from leaking pipes. Move! Jacob ordered. One by one, they slipped through the breach, Ethan, Ella, Mia, and the dogs. Jacob stayed at the rear, waiting for Ronan, who laid down a final line of fire before ducking inside. Jacob pressed the interior detonation switch. Behind them, the vault door slammed shut. Another controlled blast triggered, collapsing the tunnel and sealing the corridor behind them. The facility shook. Fire suppression systems kicked in, dousing the vault with foam. For a moment, it was quiet. They crawled through the last stretch of the tunnel and emerged into a dark drainage shaft that led out into the forest behind the academy grounds. They reached the surface. Dawn was barely breaking. The trees looked the same as they always had, but nothing felt the same anymore. Jacob stood slowly, scanning the horizon. Everyone accounted for? He asked. Ethan nodded. Drive's safe. Uploads confirmed. World knows. Ella held Mia close. We made it. Mia looked up at the sky, her voice soft but unshaking. They'll keep coming. Jacob nodded. Let them. Because now the truth is out, and the world's going to see what they did. We're not hiding anymore. Max limped up beside him, his fur singed but his head high. They tried to turn children into weapons, Jacob said. But they forgot one thing. He looked at Mia. You're not just a weapon. You're the reason we fight. Mia gave a small smile, the first true one in days, and behind her, the dogs stood like sentinels watching the tree line, because though they had won this battle, the war was far from over. Part 19. The world reacts. The sun had fully risen by the time they made it to the next safe house, an abandoned ranger outpost nestled deep in the forest, far off any mapped trails. Birds chirped quietly through the misty treetops, and the air was damp and cool with early summer rain. Inside the wooden cabin, the group had set up a makeshift base. Ronan was tending to the dog's wounds in the main room. Max's shoulder had been bruised badly, and Coda had a long gash near his flank, but none of it was fatal. Ranger had made it through relatively unharmed. Still pacing near the windows like a restless scout, Mia sat near the fireplace, wrapped in a thick blanket, staring into the flames. She hadn't said much since they escaped the facility. Ella sat next to her in quiet solidarity, never letting the girl out of her sight. On the other side of the room, Jacob and Ethan huddled around a satellite laptop rig that Ronan had pieced together using scavenged tech from the bunker. I reconnected the signal through a cascade of proxy nodes, Ethan said, his fingers flying over the keys. It's slow, but it's safe. The files are out there, multiple cloud dumps, public drives, private channels. Jacob leaned in. Anyone picking it up? Ethan smirked. See for yourself. He turned the laptop toward them. On the screen, dozens of notifications lit up, posts, articles, and videos popping up in real time. Secret experimentation on children exposed. Project Kestrel. Files leak online. Ex-military sources confirm rogue operation buried by Defense Department. Public outrage erupts after photos of experimented children go viral. More kept coming. Whistleblower networks were cross-referencing files. Human rights groups were mobilizing. Protest hashtags were trending. Journalists were swarming to whatever leads they could find. They're not ignoring it, Ethan said. They're actually listening. Jacob let out a long breath. Good. That's the only armor we've got now. Attention. Ronan stepped in, wiping blood from his hands with a rag. We just started a war. You understand that, right? Jacob stood. They declared it first. We're just finally fighting back. Ronan nodded grimly. Still, they'll strike back hard. Kestrel's dead, but whatever grew in its place black. Echo, rogue operators, private contractors, they won't let this stand. Then we don't stand still, Jacob said. We make our next move. From the corner, Mia spoke up without looking away from the fire. There's another sight. Everyone turned toward her. She glanced over her shoulder. I remembered something. After we left the vault, there's another Kestrel facility. Smaller, remote. They used it for early tests before Redridge. I think there might be survivors. Other kids? Ella asked. Mia nodded slowly. They weren't as far along as I was, but they were there. Some of them were taken before the program went fully dark. If they're alive, they've been in hiding, or we're still under control. Jacob's expression hardened. If there are more children, we find them. Ethan turned back to the laptop. Coordinates? I don't have exact ones, Mia admitted. But I remember trees, mountains, a river shaped like a hook. And a man with a bird tattoo. He was kind. He helped me once. Said if I ever needed to run, I should follow the stars west. Ronan rubbed his beard. That sounds like Echo Trail. There's an old military research facility buried under a former radar station in that region, shut down years ago. Then that's our next target, Jacob said. But we need to move carefully. We won't have the element of surprise this time. I'll prep what we can, Ronan said. But it'll take a couple of days. We'll need rest, fuel, and new gear. Ella finally spoke. What if they find us before then? Jacob turned to her. They might, but now the whole world is watching. They can't erase us the same way anymore. Mia looked up at him. They'll try. I know, Jacob replied. But this time, we won't be alone. Outside the cabin, Max barked sharply. Jacob rushed to the window. A small drone hovered silently in the distance, blinking red. It's a scout, Ronan said. Watching, but not attacking. Let them watch, Jacob muttered. He pulled the curtain closed. They'll see what comes next. Part 20. The line between that night, the forest surrounding the ranger outpost was eerily quiet. No owls, no crickets. Just wind slipping through the pine trees like a whisper that never stopped moving. Inside the cabin, the group took turns resting. In shifts, Jacob stayed near the front window, rifle across his lap. Max sat beside him, chin resting on his paws but eyes open and alert. A lantern glowed softly in the main room, casting long shadows over the maps and documents spread across the table. Ethan dozed in the corner, curled up against a duffel bag of hardware and satellite gear. Ronan stood just outside the back door, cigarette glowing in the dark as he scanned the tree line every few minutes. Mia sat cross-legged on the wooden floor beside the hearth, staring at the flickering flames. Ella sat next to her, brushing a few strands of hair from the girl's face. You're safe now, Ella said quietly. Mia didn't answer at first. Then she spoke without turning. I don't feel safe, not really. Ella leaned closer. Why? Mia swallowed. Because they're still out there, watching, and I know how they think. I was trained the same way. To strike when fear turns into rest. They'll come when they think we've exhaled. Ella hesitated. Do you think we can really stop them? Mia finally looked at her. We can't stop them all. But we can make them afraid of what we know, what we remember, what we survived. There was something different in her eyes now, something older than her years, but not hardened. Not yet, just awakened. Jacob and Ronan stood over the table, planning next steps. She says there might be more kids, Jacob said. Still out there, maybe even being used as part of newer operations. Ronan nodded grimly. That matches chatter I heard a few years ago. Programs under different names, Orchid, Mercury Root, Project Nova, all off book, all recruiting from vanished children. Kestrel didn't end, it evolved. Jacob leaned over the map. If we follow the Echo Trail west, We can hit the old radar base Mia mentioned. But we need better eyes and ears, and we need allies. Ronan raised an eyebrow. Anyone still take your calls? A few ghosts, Jacob said. People the government tried to silence like us. Former operatives, freelancers. One of them is in Nevada calcine Wraith. She runs an encrypted underground network. If anyone knows where the kids are, it's her, Ronan grunted. Getting to Nevada will take more than hiking boots. I'll arrange transport, Jacob said. Quiet back channel. We don't go near cities, we travel like shadows. Outside, the wind shifted. A crack of a branch. Jacob reached for his rifle instinctively, but it was only Ranger, trotting back toward the porch, ears twitching. He dropped something at Ronan's feet. A black object, sleek, round. Jacob knelt beside it. Is that? A tracker, Ronan confirmed, eyes narrowing. It's not broadcasting now, but it was recently. Jacob's face darkened. They've been here, close, watching. Ronan looked toward the darkness. We need to leave, before dawn. At first light, the group moved. Ella packed food and supplies. Ethan secured the encrypted drives into a reinforced case. The dogs were eager, sensing change in the air. Coda and Ranger paced near the cabin door, while Max sat at Mia's side, ever protective. As they stepped outside into the mist-covered clearing, Jacob took one last look at the small cabin. He'd hoped for more rest, more time to plan, but the enemy was already at the doorstep. He turned to the group. We go west. We don't stop until we find this radar base, Mia spoke softly. When we find it, what if they're still inside, still under control? Jacob didn't blink. Then we bring them out, one way or another. Ronan approached with a camouflaged SUV and a trailer rigged for off-road terrain. Everything's loaded. We'll travel back trails first, then link up with Wraith once we hit desert country. Ethan climbed in. You think we'll make it? We've made it this far, Jacob said. And we've got the truth on our side. But even as they drove into the trees, Mia looked back one last time, toward the spot where the tracker had been found. She knew they weren't done yet. Somewhere behind them, in the trees or above them in the sky, Black Echo was moving. Too, and this time, they might not be watching, they might be following. Part 21. Signals in the sand. The convoy moved like ghosts across the landscape. No headlights, no chatter, only the steady rumble of the camouflaged SUV and the rhythmic growl of the trailer's tires against the dirt road. Trees gave way to scrubland, then to desert. The forest had fallen behind them like a memory, and ahead was nothing but sand, sun-scorched rock, and distant mountains like the backs of sleeping beasts. Inside the vehicle, the mood was tense but focused. Ethan sat in the passenger seat beside Ronan, scanning satellite pings and intercepted chatter through his modified rig. Jacob was behind the wheel of the second vehicle with Mia and Ella in the back, flanked by the dogs. Max's head rested in Mia's lap, his eyes flicking toward the windows every so often, as if expecting danger to rise from the horizon itself. Anything? Jacob asked over the radio. Ethan's voice crackled back, still clear. No drones. No pings, but Wraith's gone dark. Jacob's eyes narrowed. Gone dark how? Her beacon was up 2 days ago. Now, nothing. Like someone erased her signature off the grid. Could be she's hiding, Ronan suggested. She's known to drop off the map when things heat up. Or, Jacob said, someone else wiped her out. Mia spoke up quietly from the back seat. She knew about Kestrel, right? She knew too much, Jacob replied. She helped me get out when I tried to expose it years ago. Back then, I thought blowing the whistle would fix everything. But the program just mutated and buried itself deeper. Ella looked out the window. Then what makes this time different? Jacob didn't answer right away. Then he looked into the rearview mirror, catching Mia's eyes. She does. They reached the outskirts of the Nevada basin by mid-afternoon, the sun casting long shimmering waves over the desert. A cluster of abandoned comms towers jutted from a low ridge, warped by rust and time. Below, a compound sat buried in the sand, half-collapsed buildings, hangars choked in dust, and one still-standing radar dish pointing uselessly at the sky. Ronan parked behind a ridge, checking the perimeter with binoculars. No movement, no guards, no cameras. Either it's dead, or someone wants it to look that way. Jacob crouched beside him. We go in quiet, just me and Mia at first. Ethan, keep monitoring. Ella, stay with the dogs. If something jumps, let him off the leash. Ella nodded and laid a gentle hand on Coda's collar. They're ready, Mia stepped forward. I remember this place. We weren't brought here often, only when something went wrong at Redridge. A few of us got transferred for correction. They called this site Hollow Point. That sounds comforting, Ronan muttered. Mia pointed toward the collapsed hangar. There's a bunker below that building. A spiral stairwell hidden under the main floor. That's where they kept the forgotten ones, the failures. Jacob placed a hand on her shoulder. You sure you're ready for this? I've been ready since they made me forget my own name. Inside the hangar, dust hung thick in the air. Sunlight filtered through broken roof panels and slanted beams, catching on old rusted crates and cables half buried in sand. Footsteps echoed eerily, and the only sounds were the creaks of old metal and the dry rasp of wind against the walls. Mia led Jacob through the central chamber and toward a collapsed supply platform. Beneath it, she cleared debris and revealed a rusted circular hatch exactly where she remembered. She placed her hand on the sensor panel. It beeped once and unlocked. They descended the spiral staircase in silence. It groaned under their weight, as if unused for decades. The air grew colder, mustier. The smell of decay began to replace the scent of sand and sun. And then they reached the bottom. A long hallway extended before them. Fluorescent lights buzzed to life overhead, one by one. Doors lined both sides of the corridor, small windows revealing empty rooms, cots, restraints, scratched metal walls. But then they reached one door that was still sealed tight. On it was a symbol, an eye within. A circle, the mark of Kestrel. Mia stepped forward and spoke into the intercom next to the door. Subject 9 requesting entry. A pause, then incredibly a voice crackled through the speaker, young, uncertain. ... Mia? Jacob stiffened. Mia leaned in. Kilo? Is that you? Another pause. Then the sound of bolts unlocking. The door creaked open. Inside, a dimly lit room revealed a boy no older than 12 standing barefoot on the cold floor. His eyes were sunken, his frame thin, but he was alive. Behind him, 2 other children stood silently, watching. Mia, the boy whispered. They told us you were dead. I was supposed to be, she said, stepping in slowly. But I came back. Jacob stepped in behind her. How many of you are left? The boy shook his head. Only a few. They came for us a year ago. Took some. The ones who didn't obey disappeared. Mia crouched down to meet his eyes. We're here to get you out. You're free now. The boy looked around, confused. Free? We don't know what that means. Jacob's voice was low. Then we'll show you. Suddenly, Ethan's voice crackled over the comm. Jacob! We've got movement. Vehicles. 4 black SUVs. Fast. No markings. Jacob's eyes sharpened. Black Echo. Mia turned to the boy. You trust me? The boy nodded. Then run. Jacob grabbed his comm. Everyone out. Full retreat. We've got company. Above, the wind picked up as dust began to whip across the desert. At the ridge, Ella unclipped all the dogs. Max, Ranger, and Coda stood tall, their muscles tense, their instincts flaring. Ella whispered, Guard the children. And as engines roared in the distance and tires tore across the dirt, Dodge charged into the wind. Part 22. The forgotten order dust exploded across the dry Nevada basin as 4 unmarked SUVs tore across the plain, heading straight for the collapsed radar compound. From the ridge above, Ella crouched behind the dogs, watching the convoy draw closer with surgical precision. Her heart pounded, her mouth dry. She whispered to Max, Coda, and Ranger, who were crouched low beside her, ears perked. "You know what to do. No mercy this time." Max gave a low growl, almost like agreement. Then she keyed the mic. "Jacob, they'll be on top of you in 2 minutes." Below, deep in the bunker, Jacob and Mia led Kilo and the 2 other children back toward the spiral staircase. The lights flickered overhead as if the facility itself sensed something coming. "They're trained for ambush," Jacob said. "We can't fight them straight. Too fast, too precise." Mia looked back at the children trailing them. Kilo held the smallest girl's hand protectively. They didn't talk. They didn't cry. They just followed. "They're not just trained," Mia said softly. "They're conditioned, like I was, but worse." She stopped mid-stride. A cold thought wrapped around her mind like ice. What if they're not here for us? Jacob turned. "What do you mean? What if they're here for them?" she said, nodding toward the kids, "to reclaim them." Jacob swore under his breath. "Then we don't let them." The first SUV screeched to a halt outside the hangar. Doors opened simultaneously. Out stepped 6 figures, tall, masked, dressed in gray combat suits. Silent as shadows, but they weren't alone. A 7th figure stepped from the second vehicle, moving with slow, deliberate calm. A woman. Unmasked. Mid-50s, short gray hair, sharp eyes. Mia saw her through a crack in the collapsed stairwell and froze. Doctor Marion Voss. "She's alive," Mia whispered. Jacob looked at her. "Who is that?" "She was the director of Kestrel. She disappeared 5 years ago. Everyone thought she was dead." Mia's hands trembled. "She was the one who named me Subject 9. Outside, Voss looked toward the bunker with amusement, then spoke into her headset. "Seal the exits. I want the girl alive, the rest disposable." The operatives moved like clockwork. 2 peeled off to the east side. Another trio swept the hangar. One dropped a pulse scanner, the screen lighting up with thermal echoes below. "They're in the lower vault. Room temperature readings suggest multiple juveniles. Subject 9's signature is confirmed." Voss smiled, so predictable. Inside, Ethan's voice came through the coms again. "We can't hold this ground. They're blocking sat links and jamming shortwave. I can punch a hole for 60 seconds if I reroute the backup core." "Do it," Jacob ordered. He turned to the children. "Listen to me. We're getting out of here. All of you, no matter what happens, stick close to Mia." "I'm not leaving," Mia said suddenly. "What?" Jacob turned sharply. She stepped forward, eyes cold. "Voss is here. I'm going to talk to her." "Are you out of your mind?" Jacob snapped. "No, I remember what she did. And now I remember how to fight her." Jacob opened his mouth to protest, but then stopped. There was something in her. Voice calculated, unshaken. "Like a soldier reclaiming her own programming. She thinks she still owns me," Mia said. "It's time I show her she doesn't." Outside, Voss stepped over a ridge of broken cement and entered the hangar. Her operatives flanked her, silent sentinels. She moved slowly, almost bored, her hands clasped behind her back, and then she heard it. Footsteps. One pair. Light. Purposeful. Mia stepped from the stairwell's shadow like a ghost walking out of a long-forgotten memory. Voss stopped. For the first time, she looked surprised. "Subject 9, she said smoothly. "You're older." Mia didn't blink. "I'm not your subject," Voss smiled. "Don't be dramatic. You're part of something far greater than you understand. You were made to be exceptional, and I'm here to bring you home." "I already found home," Mia said. "It wasn't With you. Voss took a step forward. You don't remember the truth, Mia. You chose this. You weren't taken. You volunteered. Mia's stomach twisted. No, she said. Voss pulled a device from her coat, small, flat, and metallic. She tapped it. A video began to play. A room. Mia, much younger, maybe 5, sitting at a table. Do you want to help make the world better? Voss's voice said. Mia's younger self nodded. Would you give up fear to protect the people you love? Another nod. Would you trust me? The small girl whispered, yes. Voss tapped the device off. You weren't taken, you were given. Offered up by your parents, willingly. Mia froze. Jacob, hidden above, tightened his grip on the rifle. His instincts screamed to act, but something in Mia's posture told him to wait. Mia spoke slowly. Maybe that little girl trusted you, but I'm not her anymore. Voss's voice dropped, predatory. Oh, but I'm still me. And you belong to me, Subject 9. Suddenly, Kilo's voice echoed from the stairwell. No, she doesn't. Voss turned. The boy stood with the other's eyes wide, hands clenched, and from above, a growl ripped through the hangar. Max leapt down from the catwalk, followed by Ranger and Coda, their fury unchained. In that instant, Jacob gave the signal. Chaos exploded. Part 23. Echoes and fire. The hangar erupted into chaos. Max launched first, striking the closest black Echo operative with such force that both went tumbling into the wreckage. Coda and Ranger followed, each moving with a precision born of both training and instinct. Growls and gunfire echoed off the steel walls. Jacob dropped from the upper catwalk a split second later, rifle aimed and firing clean, controlled bursts into the encroaching enemy squad. His boots hit the ground just as Ranger tackled a second soldier, dragging him down in a blur of motion and snarling muscle. Mia didn't flinch. She stood rooted in the center of the hangar, her eyes locked on Voss, unmoving. UNBLINKING. Voss, calm despite the sudden attack, stepped backward into the shadows, activating a command beacon on her wrist. A high-frequency tone pulsed through the air. Immediately, 2 of the Black Echo soldiers stopped mid-combat. Their eyes flicked toward Mia, and then, without warning, they turned away from the fight. They began walking toward her. Jacob saw it. Mia, move. But she didn't. She stepped forward instead, her voice rising above the noise. You're not machines, she shouted at them. You're children, like me. Remember who you were before she broke you. The 2 soldiers froze. A few feet from her, one raised a trembling hand to his helmet and slowly pulled it off. A combed face, young, pale, empty-eyed, but something flickered in his gaze. Subject 6, Mia whispered. He stared at her, uncertain. You made it out? Mia nodded. And you can too. But Voss's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Obey. The tone on her wrist device shrieked louder, and the soldier flinched, his hands going to his ears. The other dropped to his knees, eyes rolling back, screaming. Mia spun. Shut it off. You're killing them. Voss didn't respond. Her face was a mask of surgical calm. They are assets, not children. You're clinging to sentiment. That's your weakness. Jacob shouted from across the hangar, exchanging fire with 2 more agents. We're pinned here. Ronan, get us a way out. From the comms, Ronan's voice replied, Tunnel under the east wing. I've rigged charges. Get everyone moving 5 minutes or we're dust. Ella was already pulling the younger children toward the side corridor, ducking through falling debris and broken crates. Come on. Move. One of the younger girls tripped, and Max immediately broke off his fight, turning and guarding her from a stray shot before ushering her forward with a bark. Mia turned back. To Subject 6 he was shaking, bleeding from his ears. She knelt. You can fight it. I did. He stared at her and then turned the weapon in his hand, not toward her, but toward Voss. She saw it. Her eyes widened. Don't, he fired. But Voss ducked behind a crate, the round missing by inches. One of her remaining operatives reacted instantly, shooting Subject 6 through the chest. He fell backward into Mia's arms. No! She screamed. He was dying, but he smiled. You remembered me. And then he was still. Mia clutched him tightly for a moment, then laid him gently down, eyes blazing with something deeper than grief rage. Stood and walked toward Voss, who was now backed into a corner, her soldiers dwindling. Her control fraying. Jacob reached her side. It's over. But Voss only smiled. You think this is where it ends? Kestrel was never about one facility. We were one branch of a root system buried so deep, you'll never dig it out. Maybe, Jacob said. But now the world knows. They won't care, she hissed. People like their safety. They'll turn a blind eye the moment something threatens their comfort. That may be true, Mia said. But we're not people like that. Behind her, Ethan's voice came over the coms. Tunnel's prepped. You need to go, now. Jacob looked at Voss. You've got 5 seconds to surrender. Voss laughed, reaching slowly into her coat. You won't shoot me. She needs me. Jacob raised his weapon. She doesn't. But before he could act, a blur of fur and fury moved first. Max lunged. His teeth locked onto Voss's wrist, just as she pulled a hidden device, likely a dead man's switch. Her scream was drowned by the sound of cracking bone. The device fell from her hand. Ella rushed forward and smashed it beneath her boot. Jacob grabbed Voss, twisted her arm behind her back, and slammed her to the ground. You're done. Mia stood over her, trembling. You destroyed so many lives. And you still think you're in control. Voss looked up, blood on her lips. You'll always be part of me. No, Mia whispered. You're the part I've burned away. Jacob looked at Ronan. Blow. The tunnel. They moved. Minutes later, from a nearby ridge, the group stood together, watching the compound collapse in a controlled cascade of fire and dust. The final pieces of Hollow Point were buried beneath stone in silence. Max sat beside Mia, nuzzling her hand. Jacob stood behind her, laying a hand gently on her shoulder. You did good. Mia didn't look away from the smoke. She remembered me, she said. The little girl I was. Do you remember her too? He asked. Mia finally turned and nodded. Yeah, and I think I'm ready to be her again. But in the distance, far beyond the collapsing compound, a satellite array in a desert canyon picked up a pulse. A single encrypted transmission, coordinates, new name, Project Nova. The root wasn't dead yet. It had just gone deeper. Part 24. Nova rising. The desert was quiet after the fire. The black smoke from the destroyed Hollow Point facility drifted slowly into the pale blue sky, like the last breath of a dying machine. No gunfire, no orders barked. Just the wind scraping across the sand and the low, constant panting of dogs recovering from battle. Jacob sat on a ridge above the ruins, his rifle across his lap, watching the smoke curl toward the horizon. Max sat beside him, eyes half closed, tail still, but ears alert. Below, Ronan was treating Koda's leg, graze from a lucky round. Ranger paced in slow, wide circles, restless and watchful. Ella sat with the children, wrapping them in blankets, whispering calming words they barely understood, but clung to like lifelines. Mia stood alone. Her hair danced in the breeze as she stared into the distance. Not at the wreckage, not at the destroyed base. But beyond. Jacob walked up behind her. We stopped Voss. You should feel like we've won something. Mia nodded slowly. We did. But the real fight is still ahead. Jacob waited. Then she handed him Ethan's device, a cracked satellite pad showing a blinking red signal. What's this? A message, Mia said. From Voss's network, one she tried to trigger before Max took her down. Jacob scrolled through the data. It was brief. Fragmented. Nova. Coordinates 36.1251N, 112.1746W. Sleepers awake. Final stage initiated. He exhaled sharply. Grand Canyon, that's deep territory. Remote, hard to reach. Perfect place to hide something big. There. Not hiding, Mia said. They're preparing. Behind them, Ethan limped over, holding his laptop rigged with solar panels. I got the last dump decrypted. Nova isn't just another kestrel branch, it's the final phase. The one Voss was building toward all along. Jacob looked over. What kind of final phase? Ethan hesitated. It's not about training soldiers anymore. It's about creating leaders. Children bred and programmed to grow up into positions of power, military, corporate, scientific. Hidden in plain sight. Entire generations prepped to pull strings from the inside. Jacob cursed under his breath. So the war doesn't start with bullets anymore. Ethan nodded. It starts with policies, laws, data, decisions we don't even see being made. Voss was just one piece. Nova is the full design. Mia clenched her fists. She told me I volunteered, that I chose this life. Jacob glanced sideways. Do you think she was lying? I don't know, Mia said softly. But I know I'm choosing this life now. And I choose to stop them. Ella stood nearby, holding one of the smaller children, and asked, how do we fight something that invisible? Ronan spoke from behind a crate, cleaning his rifle. Same way you fight anything bigger than you. One hit at a time. And you hit hard enough that they remember the pain. Jacob knelt beside the children. You were all part of something wrong, but you survived it. That's your power now. The boy named Kilo nodded. I want to help. Jacob smiled. You will. He stood and looked out toward the horizon. Nova isn't expecting us. We hit them before they activate whatever phase they've prepared. Ethan tapped on his screen. There's more. One of the Nova facilities? It's hidden inside a charity front, something called Children of the Future. It has political protection. International status. They could vanish if they feel exposed. So, we can't attack directly, Ronan said. No, Jacob agreed. We expose them, loudly, visibly. Ella frowned. And when they strike back? Jacob looked at her and then at Mia. They've been building monsters in the dark, but now the monsters are turning on them. That night, as the desert grew colder, the group camped far from the ruins, near a spring-fed oasis marked only by an old ranger sign. They gathered around a small fire, the stars sharp overhead, the dogs lying close like warm shadows. Mia sat apart at first, staring at her hands. Then slowly she stood and walked to the fire. The others quieted. She looked around at them. Jacob, Ronan, Ella, Ethan, the children, the dogs. This is the first fire I've sat by, she said softly, where I wasn't afraid of the shadows. Ella smiled gently. You're safe now, Mia shook her head. No, not yet, but we're stronger now, because we know who we are. Jacob nodded. And who we're not. She looked toward the sky. I'm not Subject 9 anymore. What? Are you then? Ethan asked. She smiled faintly. Just Mia. Max barked once, like a seal of approval. The fire cracked. Far off, in a high-security boardroom, somewhere across the country, red lights blinked on. Nova had received the breach alert. And it was preparing its response. Part 25. The fire that remains. The desert sun rose over Arizona's canyonlands as the convoy approached the location, pinged by the Nova signal. They had followed the trail for 3 days through heat, sandstorms, and silence, until now, where GPS led them to a small, unassuming compound built into the stone. It bore the name Children of the Future. The front facade was a model of charity, banners about education, global outreach, and child safety. Bright colors, friendly names, but underground. Project Nova lived. Jacob scanned the perimeter through binoculars. Too clean, too polished, That's the disguise. Ronan nodded. Thermal says the place goes 5 levels deep. Defense grid's dormant for now. They parked beyond a ridge. Ethan booted up the satellite uplink. When we breach, I'll dump the files globally. We go lev. If we go dark, the world still sees what we found. Mia tightened her gloves. We end it here. The plan was simple: get inside, extract the remaining test subjects, and expose Nova's brain trust. Ella stayed with the children they'd rescued, armed and alert. Ranger and Coda stayed back to guard. Max, of course, followed Mia without hesitation. Jacob, Mia, Ronan, and Ethan breached through a maintenance tunnel that led under the building, an old irrigation passage from the canyon's edge, long abandoned. Inside. Sterile white halls stretched like a hospital. Except it wasn't healing they practiced here. They moved in silence. The dogs picked up sense-faint traces of medication, oil, fear. Past labs with dark glass, offices, holding chambers, then a central control room, empty except for a large, holographic table and a wall of monitors. And one man. Bald, mid-60s, crisp gray suit. He turned as they entered. So, you made it. Mia froze. She knew that voice. Father, she whispered. Jacob's heart dropped. You're lying, he said, but the man raised his hand. I am Dr. Adrian Vale, Mia's biological father. And yes, I offered her to Kestrel, not out of cruelty, out of vision. Mia's breath caught. You gave me away? You were born into purpose, Vale said. You were always meant to lead. Kestrel was flawed, yes, but Nova is the future. You were to be its core. Jacob raised his rifle. Step away from the console. Vale didn't move. You don't see it, do you? We've already planted our seeds. Nova's children are already in play in offices and labs and universities. We don't need soldiers anymore. We need architects. Mia stepped forward. That's why you made us into weapons, so you could install us into the world like bombs with countdowns. No, Vale said, so you could reshape it. She looked at him, really looked at him. You never saw me as a daughter. Just a blueprint. Her voice didn't tremble. I reject you, all of this. Vale's smile faltered. Ethan signaled. Upload in progress. 78%. Keep him talking. Jacob moved closer. How many kids are still here? Vale shrugged. A dozen. Maybe more. Most are in cognitive dormancy. The rest are being groomed for induction. Max growled. Vale turned toward Mia one last time. You were my legacy. No, she said, reaching into her pack. I'm your reckoning. She pulled out the encrypted core Voss tried to activate. Weeks ago rewired by Ethan. She slammed it onto the main console. The system sparked. Ethan shouted. Upload complete. Every dirty secret just went live. Vale lunged forward, but Ronan tackled him, pinning him to the floor. Alarms began to blare. Doors unlocked. Children eyes dazed. Some barefoot, some confused stumbled from dormitory rooms and into the halls. Jacob and Mia rushed to guide them out. They're free, Mia whispered. Really free. By sunset, they stood on the canyon ridge, watching the compound crumble beneath detonation charges Ronan had rigged. Mia didn't flinch. Max sat beside her, bloodied but unharmed. Ella arrived with the other children, guiding them gently with Ranger and Coda. Ethan stepped beside Jacob. It's spreading. The leaks, the evidence. World leaders are already issuing statements. They're trying to contain it, but it's too big now. Good, Jacob said. Let them panic. Ronan lit a cigarette. So what now? Jacob turned to Mia. She didn't hesitate. We rebuild what they tried to destroy. Epilogue 6 months later. A small farmhouse in Oregon. Fenced. Safe. School building being raised nearby. Paint still drying. On the front porch. Children laughed. Some ran with the dogs. Some drew pictures under the trees. Inside. A classroom was filled with books, puzzles, and sunlight. Mia stood at the front. Older somehow, not in age, but in soul. She spoke softly. Some of us were made into weapons. Others were left behind. But here, we start over. We become ourselves. No numbers, no experiments, just kids. Max lay beneath her chair, tail wagging. Outside, Jacob, Ella, and Ronan watched the sunset. They didn't stop the world from being dark, but they lit a fire that wouldn't go out. Not now. Not ever. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.